Yes, well, as the flavor of the game show right now, as for like the very different sort of section, the effects will get to the new called keys and like a different definitely that season like will be definitely like what like I would have like that up in the front to like what like the fourth the game would be like definitely like the three of us so that definitely I'm looking right now. I'm still in the middle of the form that the game continuing on to like the fourth game. Right now, is that the scenario that I might San John definitely would be like kept alive, and that because of that as part of that the punishment that like Jinho as like the front man would be delivering to that San John as well. And definitely able to like from this point on definitely info. I'm just running with the totally as from my movie totally planning on like continuing this that have to get me of that basically how that working on that like info had like got eliminated like info would be totally planning on continuing that until all the way until like the final last six to get definitely remember the name. So that for at that point for like the front and at that point that the first plan would be to like kill San John alive until that the game would be over and I'm according to the game of finals would be only planning on regularly even if that's after like the first Squid game that even if that at that point that more than even if that any Squid candidate more than Sanjon survives like the Squid game then at that point to definitely set up like an intermediate middle Squid game exactly like that in that situation but like the only different terms of suffering would be in-house intent would be to that only ensure that through that intermediate to get to make sure that only hardware survives and moves on to let the sixth and final situation. So like I'm just that that would be the business plan to like have the scenario to create a scenario where like to do Sanjon I don't that would be entering into like to get more back in and at that point for like a host to make in order to make such like shop and survive entrance in grand entrance into the six game playground has left the front man and then for like in forth to that basically to turn it into a scenario where like Sanjo to want to stop it even would be facing off against like the front man who's like running the game and at that point and to do that absolute villains to kind of like visual treat for like so the ideas at that point would be the only intent of like involve the player and the while also simultaneously eliminating Sanjo in like the fifth game. So like at that point for like info like take off to like market like this to game in front of like Sanjo before starting like the fifth game and get that shocking reaction of like from like Sanjo and to give all that as like winners to kind of like an entertainment to like the VIPs and then it would be absolutely all confident that like info will definitely be able to like defeat Sanjon in like the Squid Game and that way eliminate Sanjon. So like Minho will be having his own ideas with definitely and his own ways of that doing things and that way like I'm looking to this clip is only due to that reason so that I'm looking like no I doubt kept Sanjon alive this entire time for like even after like the past 3 years I think like Sanjon had basically used up a lot of like the money he had to like basically with like the past 3 years I think like Sanjon having like only done that one single thing. But like going on even in like the past in the after of like the 3 years having focused on like those really trying to like find like the person the front line and the person around the to be an and put an end to like the shut down like so like I'm having constantly having that put in all that effort into that accomplishing that goal for each and every single day for like the depth of the last 3 years and the right that still in hope didn't eliminate Sancho who did due to lack this way of like thing of like info because like from info point of view like like info would be that of the mindset like what info would be feeling that like he has to actually eliminate Sancho but not without Sancho not going through any sort of game that should definitely from info point of view info might be having that strong decision that you need in order to like eliminate Sancho like info should only do that by through a scenario where like Sancho will do those things to do it and that way to that I think that only at that point to like eliminate Sancho will go down the lines of like the noise that I know definitely not there so definitely those different like the moment Sancho from that Lincoln had told that piggy bank voice or like info that this is Sancho wants to like enter into like the really games like at that point it comes to like might have not easily been able to foresee. So I don't have to like entering into that decision definitely that I don't think for that rebellion and they will trying to get the candidate to form a team with like Sanjay to that right let's start with the rebellion at some point. Even though Sanjay like team strategy and all that would be fairly like even at that point like might have only been expecting for like Sanjay to like really attempt like a rebellion. So like might have actually been absolutely and fully prepared for like the rebellion of Sanjay but even so like I was like I was like the moment Sanjay from that thing had told that he was entering the top figure and had to create like at that point because I'm going to like I might have already fixed in his mind so that they will be in like that when really got to gain like regardless of that what our Brazilians kind of value as our plan to that ensure to that break the channels and a lot of that those values and ensure to that get Sanjay also into that to game and for like import to that quick off against like Sanjay and then to six to game and only at that point for like import to that eliminate Sanjay and basically in front by literally able to do what to do. So we definitely involve that plan from like the staff at the really what we want definitely my best of it. So like so only due to this reason I was doing it definitely even though in whole the government has eliminated jump day like in whole this still using Sanjay alive and I'm still remember saying just like the levels of like even the Sanjay I don't but like children of the was part of the rebellion and but pertain would be kept alive by in like the scenario that I'm going to like info up like that. Especially during the rebellion and everything like through the course of that journey as like disguise to like the disguise of like the civilian candidate like info might have totally so that children and like how to like how certain is scared of children person and so like I'm looking for in like the person will be seeing children as like the civilian candidate that could totally provide that absolute entertainment for like the way of using like the first would be along the lines that info would be totally seeing children as well like I'm solely due to this reason like I'm doing that this whole would be totally planning on only eliminating children after like sophisticated if like children survive like sophisticated. It's definitely might be like in her plans the flavor of the rebellion. So, like the flavor of the rebellion right now, even though even though children was part of the rebellion, I would like I don't like Sadio like and like children are still really kept alive by the front and right now. It's like the scenario that I'm doing and the case of Deho, I'm leaning more towards the public like in hope only like as like the front man like so like when the pyramid is said like in the case of Dayhood, who was also part of like a sign of rebellion and also like a meaning of the positive that Dayhood as well. Exactly like Jambe getting eliminated by the frontman. It's like the scenario that I'm leaning more towards that like and I'm totally preparing for it to LDT from like the part of it from the team members of like Congress Rebellion if they want to sign as well as like children alone that like the frontman in hope will be keeping alive right now in the government is like the scenario that I'm doing and like on top of like Sanjay like current trauma of like basically witnessing that the elimination of that is like good friend and they right in front of him but from like Sanjay if not only punishing Sanjay even further by forcefully bringing Sanjay with like the emergence of like the frontman and so that I'm going them all still thinking about the friends involved right now the scenario to be like them all storming into like the studio candidate room and in front of like Sangyot as well as like all the remaining studio candidates who had chosen to like stay back at like the studio candidate room like would be in like in front of all of them that I would given like without the jury delay but like when like involved like the frontman along with like the officer and like the remaining studio members would be storming in to like studio candidate room. It's like scenario that I'm looking at. At that point, like the frontman would be taking the life of like Keiko of like Derek who are extreme with their Keiko is like the scenario that I'm preparing. That too in front of like Sanjay as well as like all the villains to the candidate. And so that in a way as of to that gave me realistically involves like the front man would be like trying to like instill more of that fear into that and not only on the speaking candidates but also into like Sanjay as well as if like basically this is like the consequences of like if they ever think of like starting another rebellion like all the for them to like all this remember that this will be that the consequence will be along the lines to instill intelligence when of like instill that deep fear into like the minds of like the clear candidates so that like definitely involved would have like absolutely no one years anymore to be elected as like it could be a candidate anymore. So like the represents that for like that city house that they hope will be getting eliminated. Definitely they hope will be eliminated by the frontman and host like the scenario that I'm right. And the case of children like I'm talking like definitely like either one of like the either it being like the officers or like yeah, or like himself like will be walking towards like children and children will be like totally at that point will be getting scared and like children will be about to like would be picking up some weapon and will be about to fight that. But like at that point I was looking at one period that old mother looking candidate like I was looking at her that keeping children from retaliated and I'm looking at she would be that I'm looking at her totally having feeling that like that not a student candidate having that firm belief that they that frontman or like the framework of won't be something children. It's like the scenario that I'm looking, especially with like Sanjon at that point won't be like eliminated and would be brought to them to being candidate on like captivity kind of like a situation like I'm bring them between like I'm bring that not a Syrian candidate would be totally absolutely believe that children would be also kept alive by the frontman. So like I'm doing that exactly happening and like the frontman showing up towards like children and basically snatching away all that forcefully taking away all that ammo that great number of ammo that's currently in that children capable or positive was like the scenario that I was doing. Also like the weapon that like the children as well, like on the will be taking away. It's like the scenario that I was doing on the brain and when friends. Also since I person on the brain version like from like the very beginning of like the 2024 games itself might have only expected that a rebellion attempt from like Sangyon at some point in like the 2024 game like definitely this will be the precise reason for like right now in like the present that during like the rebellion like straight away that is taking the decision to like put on like the front man like even keeping on like the front man outfit in the meet my book this is definitely due to that from this point on, like technique, Info we only might have been only expecting a rebellion from like Sanjon all the way back from like the very beginning. It's definitely well bred of the 24th century. So like I'm saying, like plan might have been for like definitely like might have made all the preparations to like counter like the such a rebellion and so like at that point like plan might have been to like definitely once like Sanjon will be eventually like attempting for such a rebellion to like destroy that rebellion and then as like use the fact that like Sangyo of like Sangyo starting a rebellion totally against like Sangyo by that basically that using that as like a reason to that give that for again from as like the front man to that to like the Syrian candidate movement to give that as absolute punishment to workers to get candidates including Sangyo that basically solely due to the rebellion that like in hope is that basically as like a punishment is that going to like take away the option of that basically of the student candidates to be able to like do the game and like making it compulsory for them to for each and every single one of the student candidates to that play the game all the way until like the final game and to totally put on that fake act and basically that to declare such a role as like, in the name of like punishment for like starting the rebellion and while at the same time simultaneously to take the life of that to bring that form of that eliminated rebellion team members into like the Syrian candidate or that way instilling fear into like the Syrian candidate so that like and coupling that with like the fleet who will be right now also planning on that so not to like Syrian candidate on and like then taking eliminating Deho right in front of them as well as like a punishment as also like a punishment for like starting Sanjon and them like starting a rebellion that way like to instill that civilian signally instill that beat you up into like Syrian candidate go and like it would be actually confidently expecting that like that the fear might be deeply set in the same levels to be candidates at that point, and they won't be regardless of whatever value that Sanjo tries from that point on to like stop another predator like none of the Brazilian candidates won't be that helping Sanjo on that like and won't be like part of that won't be joining Sanjo at that point. So like ensure this will be definitely a first plan and basically through such a manner to create such a scenario where like the student candidate would be in like a situation like all of them would be in a situation where like they won't be able to like they won't be have to they will be in a situation where like so that to create a situation where like they would have like compulsory play or fixed to games and they won't be having like the option to like leave the studio and basically and they will also be like controlled by the fear of like the initial of like the rebellion created by San John and the like consequence that like none of the civilian leaders will be even having like the courage to like start another rebellion at that point. So like this way like trap all the civilian candidates including San John within that game building and basically to continue with like that way in order to that hoping that he would be easily able to like continue something ahead with like the first plan. This would be most likely to eventually ensure that like Sanjol, like fit to like all the way to like the 60 game where like and section online will be planning on that having that ultimate battle against like Sanjol and eliminate Sanjol in like the 60 game in front of like while the GM to continue out. This would be definitely in house plan is definitely my personal impression. But also I'm still the element of the reimbursement as like about like that individual who unwellness father to get candidate that Sujan worked on in that red uniform who had eliminated that father Sujan candidate would definitely naturally would be like Neol. It's definitely my opinion which is of Sujan also. So like definitely Neol might have ensured to like might have used her weapon in such a way by ensuring to like kill that father Julian candidate. Like it's definitely my language and Neol I'm preferring that Neol's plan would be to like definitely ensure to like save that father Julian candidate and what like strategy that Neol will be using would be like probably Neol keeping him alive and at that point I'm preferring like the Brazilian work of the great of the shop that like and might be like come to the conclusion that like New York has finally changed and like and New York to their side and to think along the way they think about like the organ trading and everything. So definitely that way like protect New York would be that along with them would be helping them and along with them would be like taking like uh, the topic of that Constitution candidate where he would be like to lack that whole the within like this video building where that they be like performing like the surgeries and everything. So like since like definitely on the like even in 2024 like there won't be any CCTV cameras yeah, even after these two like I think like in like the 2020 studio from that surgery room, like I was going still even to like super convinced surgery for like definitely the CCTV won't be like still won't be set up till that room is definitely for like and you all will be totally prepared for what to do at that point. It's definitely so like I'm going that so that part of studio United at Embassy for like while he arrived brought and being put onto that table in that surgery room and like I'm just like the those like studio worker like and there will be a squad of studio worker and that's so like looking at that studio worker along with those other two studio workers who had earlier had attacked Neo like they will be present there as well. So that that now studio worker will be about to perform that the procedure like I'm doing right before that I was like Neo like probably quickly pulling out her weapon and basically eliminating those three or like four studio workers that will be will be present in that area. So that's the scenario that I was in. And then like Neo will actively trying to like save that Palestinian candidate like the scenario that I'm doing. So like what New York might say something different like no that would be that New York the different like hiding that Palestinian candidate in some like secret location within like this Muslim building is like one possible scenario that I'm doing where there won't be any CCTV and I'm doing that way like a secret location within like the Muslim building where like I was like which that New York might have found out themselves that they will train with you. So maybe they are like hiding like the Palestinian candidate. That's like one possible scenario that I'm looking at. More like the opposite scenario that I'm looking at. More like after New York would be like eliminating those Muslim workers like New York using that maybe that through somehow managing to say that get like that Palestinian candidate out of like this game building this like the scenario that I'm doing. So we are using some sort of like a new path which like neural substance might have probably found out at the neural basically saving that power Korean candidate and getting that power Korean candidate outside of like the studio building this like the scenario that I'm doing. So like around like neural like neural like that way like neural taking like the Palestinian candidate and hiding somewhere within like the forest in like West Indian island. Is that one possible scenario that I'm looking. So because like I'm looking like maybe in like the problem that use Jenga writing in which that uh, in which like Muslim candidates are brought to like the Muslim island that might in like the person might not be perfect in like the might not be at all in like the Syrian island just like also like about that and so like maybe that you are looking around for that Jenga but like not finding it. So like I'm doing that way like you are regarding to like temporarily hide within like this Syrian island this like the scenario where I'm also looking. So like when you're during that time like basically treating like that power Syrian candidate is like the scenario. While hiding in some forts in like this island is like the scenario that I'm looking. Okay, so like definitely the looking to the temperature right now for like the coffin that like the Indian workers have right now brought into like the Indian candidate or like I'm from that coffin would definitely be containing like the form of junk bay himself definitely by the temperature. So like expectations like junk bay was like always with everything decision of like Sanjon was always with like mainly was also like always was with like Sanjon and was like strongly right beside like Sandron during that Sandron like a rebellion and Sandron had like asked for like the studio candidate to like help him with like the rebellion and everything just now that since like it was like Jambe that was like in always close to like Sandron and in full support of like Sandron as like close friend of Sandron. So like I'm remembering that lead to give that shock to like this game candidates and to instill that fear onto like this game candidates and that way to like ensure that growth the Syrian candidate that way being controlled by fear, that they won't do that daring to like start a rebellion to ensure this and even while like prevention scenario of like the situation which I'm interpreting that for like the involved like the command without necessarily delay that going up to like Syrian candidate and at that point like announcing that will be as like the punishment for like the their rebellion would be around the 19th or the thing, even though like the majority of like the main Syrian candidates wasn't part of like Sanders, like the rebellion team, like undergoing still like info would be that turning things around into such a way that basically it was as if like info was like the front man is like punishing like the entirety of like the Syrian candidates by for like the rebellion by like taking away their option to like lead the games is like the scenario that was and then all compulsorily having to like play all six of like sequences like the scenario that I'm we should involve with the like so like even in such a situation like to ensure that like the Syrian candidates wouldn't dare to like start another rebellion would be the reason for like right now the topic being brought to like the CBA candidate role. It's definitely an inference, and that would be definitely a study and inference, and it would be like the cost of that Zambe to like basically instill that they fear and to like control like the Syrian candidates with that they fear into like ensuring that they won't start another they won't attempt for like another rebellion. Definitely not the trend. Okay, so like the new reimpression right now that is it's like sign your authority through that's like through that has been brought through like the talking to like the studio candidate like I'm the still I'm the without much delay of the probably like the frontman info as well as like the author as well as like it's like main team of like studio workers with like the stars would be entering into like studio candidate room and they will be like showing up with like a bunch of coffins, like the scenario that I'm giving, and those coffins would be like specifically the context of like the team members of like Sangon for Agenda, instantly and you know would be ensuring potentially would be ensuring to like do that after like waiting for like Sangon to wake up. So like I'm thinking like the name of the brand like info might have only like put something like done something to like put Sangon into a brief sleep intermittent first. So like I'm just like by the time like Sanjon will be waking up, it will be at that point that like info. would be like showing up with game of the as like this from and like the scenario that I'm looking at. Like I'm considering definitely before and I'm considering the purpose of all the remaining team members of like Sanjay rebellion team would be definitely steady that would be that brought through a coffin and would be like there are each and every one of the coffins would be displayed to in front of like all the studio candidates to instance that clear like the scenario that plus like Dayho but the point like the front man will be eliminating Dayho an extremely scary Dayho right in front of like the studio candidates as well. It's also definitely my particular ambition for like the scenario that I'm for also definitely my 300% right now as for like in-house decision as like the front line to like bring the topic containing Sanjon, analyze Sanjon first to like civilian candidate role. Well, that as well would be like in a realistic manner would be like imposed uh, plan to like basically to create that much of a scare and shock within like the remaining civilian candidates and like civilian candidate role. Especially when because like the scenario that I'm saying for like since like the hot coffin right now that is brought to the civilian candidate room contains Sanjon, analyze Sanjon, and the that once like without much regulations according to my situation that they bring like more topics being brought to like the student candidate room and it would be once like Sanjon would be waking up and like at that point I was wondering this great number of topics would be like brought into that the student candidate room at that point is like the scenario that I'm looking at. And even at that point I was just like the majority of like the and was wondering almost like all the student candidates would be not expecting uh, so it would be exactly like the same situation as like Sanjon where like even though they would be brought to like civilian candidate or in like the top in like the civilian candidates at that point would be not expecting for like those other topics, great number of topics that would be at that point brought into the civilian candidate room would be containing like the remaining team members of like the rebellion, all of them in like and it's the very same alive kind of state as that of Sanjon. So like I'm looking that way that while Sanjon will be quickly opening up like the other problems like at that point I was like Sanjon shockingly shockingly screaming and shouting that absolute shock and trauma where like I'm living at that point like would be when like the remaining studio candidates would be shockingly realizing that like it was only Sanjon that prophet Edo contained like a civilian candidate member as part of like, the rebellion was like kept alive while all the remaining prophet would be containing like the process of like the team members of like the rebellion would be along the lines I'm going to give that unexpected absolute shock to like the civilian candidates would be like in source like well to plan. It's definitely my personal ambition. Okay, so then the movement with the ambition right now, I saw like the government right now trying to like frame lecture that of like the drone operator as like still casually going overboard. Like I'm remembering that right now definitely I'm remembering the scenario to be like right now itself like like Mr. Choi like definitely I'm remembering right now would be like mentioning the fact that he had seen that the boardman in like the middle of the night. Uh, definitely my preferred before middle of that exact night, like Chojun, making that reveal right now, that crucial detail right now is definitely my positive impression. And that's when I'm definitely putting like the boardman only the boardman's body language changing and like the boardman still struggling and basically like trying to like convince all of the other team members that basically that like Mr. Joy will be like only imagining things like that like the boardman will straight away denying that then the boardman will be totally telling all of them and Mr. Joy that like he might be totally imagining he might have totally seen some screen like would be along the lines of that the boardman trying to like trick attempting to like trick and frame Mr. Joy into that basically into trying to like manipulate Mr. Joy into like thinking that basically it might have been a dream and like and all that. So it was like a scenario where like Mr. Joy had basically was kind of like half asleep. So he I think that had woke up and seen like the boatman in the middle of that night. So like I'm looking at definitely so like definitely, I think definitely that might be the case with also the New England. So chaos with Joy back then might have been half a click, definitely New England. And yet like I'm telling you when let's the board and say for example different that was Joy telling trying to like convince like Jung Ho that they really it was proved that like Mr. Choi was like that he was like half big, yet like on the net he could totally he definitely is absolutely sure that he had seen that both might in like the middle of the night would be along the lines and Mr. Choi would be trying only with that absolute serious way would be like trying to like convince like Jumbo the name of the episode. So like at that point I was from like the boatman totally once again like telling uh, saying that like Mr. Choi is like totally imagining things about just his screen. And so like that way I'm wondering maybe like the majority among like the team members like totally thinking that like it was just that the boatman is like the one having the thing. But like I'm wondering that since like Jung Ho is like a police officer, like he would be totally able to like read like the body language, like the change like the body language of like the boardman and compare that with like the body language of Mrs. Shoyan might be easily differently while the scenario to be like while like the majority of like the team of like Jang Ho will be being the boardman and the like will be Jang Ho at that point will be only having that like facial expression change and will be becoming extremely serious and then because of that Jang Ho straight away walking towards like the boardman and only maybe like holding like the boardman by the throne of by the throne of and basically that you see the face and in an enraged manner like asking like the boatman after like what happened. So like at that point I was wondering maybe like the boatman quickly pulling out a weapon which like he might be having like pocket and then like maybe like the boatman quickly maybe attacking Janko at that point, it's like the scenario that I'm looking for. So like Janko getting injured that way, like the scenario that I'm putting. Yet like the boatman will be that way, like will be probably injuring, maybe like injuring Janko and trying to that might even after like injuring Janko, like the boatman might jump off like the boat and try to like swim and escape. But like I'm saying definitely at that point itself, like the other team members like straight away jump straight away telling the other team members straight away that would be like jump like that really see into the waters and would be like all of them would be like jumping into like the water and they would be capturing like the boatman at that point would be desperately trying to like escape and get away at that point. Like, so now it's not happening. And then I'm like the interrogation beginning by jump out to that the boatman that the scenario that I'm doing. So like at that point it will be that such an absolute shock for like well Janko who until that point might have genuinely seen like the boatman as like such an absolute different and a great guy and a nice guy and then especially when the so the interrogation beginning and basically through the interrogation I'm looking like that the Janko only interrogating and making like the boatman reveal, hopefully making the government reveal that the location of like the road that like is allied to like the game and info as well as the Mughal bridge. So like definitely in the case of info, like I'm talking like info before info became that and had entered in like the really 15 Williams. Like even before that, like after like this sportman might be someone that might have been a friend of info even before that. Definitely was great. So definitely even after like entering into like the 2015 experience like into like info might have totally while like the experience after like the experience will be over each year like I'm doing like info would be that might be like meeting up with like this uh boatman and might be like spending time with this boatman especially on the embassy. So like definitely and that way slowly info might have been even using like this like boatman for like whenever info had any sort of like I use connecting to the experiences also definitely with the ambition. So definitely, whenever like information that way thought like the movement to that totally be part of, to do things that involve products out there. There's definitely with the ambition. So out of their concept, so like I'm looking at the boardman as well will be definitely from having that villain stick kind of like an age of the same as like that of it also. So definitely with the direction. You know, might have paid like the boardman uh, a handsome sum of like money in exchange for like the help that the government might have at that point offered in host as even the register. So like that might have been what might have happened in the past and definitely that the government even saving Janko life back in like 2020 after like Janko falling from the split as well, which is only according to like in order would be along the lines of the different like the Bodman revealing theory like the information based that jump on the absolute shock to like find that out. And the player will so that interrogation like jump for finding out. about like the location of like the uh, of like Squid Island. Uh, it's definitely one of the ranges, and like it will be most likely like jump over at that point, like getting a swindy and race to like the boatman and jump over threatening like the boatman to like take his life if like the boatman doesn't get them to like the actual Squid Island quickly is like my personal impression. That way, like still able to like definitely deep down within like jump we definitely having that feeling of like due to like jump like until that point seeing like the boardman as is like absolute good friend like even with like the jump of me finding out like the boardman being like a traitor, not really a traitor but also connected to like this civilians and everything like everyone still Jamho won't be having like the intent at all to like eliminate or take the life of like the boardman even after such an extreme betrayal. I'm definitely still I'm Jamho would be only putting on that absolute fake correcting with the boardman to like eliminate the boardman if he doesn't listen to like Jamho and basically quickly take Jamho and all of them to like this game and just like making another better. So like I'm the boardman from his point of view he would be totally thinking that basically Jamho will be actually serious about like eliminating him with clear up in like Jamho. So like through that way through that absolute fear like I'm through the boardman quickly taking Jungho and let the team to that the hotel exact Squid Island is like the scenario that I'm looking yet like I'm looking like by the time Jungho and team would be making it to like the Squid Island and definitely everything by then definitely the fourth Squid Game would be over by then. Definitely remember the revenge. Definitely remember the revenge. So like definitely due to this reason I'm preparing like according to my preference I'm preparing like nice and peace would be definitely will be connected to like the nature of like the fourth subject. It's definitely as to like what it would be like. It's definitely my personal theory and process than anything else. Obviously, like the name of the rainbow shell right now, like for like John even right now, suspecting like the boatman and basically with like the boatman, it's used of like the rescues and everything. I'm still seeing him and the friend that like basically definitely John by now might have observed like the so far in like John journey, like I'm looking John might have observed like the drone operating like the drone to the point of like I'm delivering drone might I mean like John right now might be feeling to that extent confident that basically he might be able to like operate the drone definitely so like even with like one of like John team members like uh, uh take the decision to dock at like the nearest island or something and basically just for another drone operate like what John Farm is covering right now would be doing would be like totally that obviously like right now like the government would be totally feeling would be feeling that basically he has successfully once again managed to like correct all of them. But like I'm saying what right now the happen would be definitely John Farm right now would be won't be just able to like totally that let let go of like that mistake of like the drone operator. Definitely my preference. So like an example right now to be that searching for the drone operator drone and basically example right now would be finding it. So like I'm looking like definitely so like definitely I'm looking that way and I'm looking definitely that the boatman even though he had attempted to like mess up like the drone operator drone when like the drone operator have found like the boatman but still he might have not been able to like mess it up uh, to like mess it up to like the point of like going to working is like the scenario that I was doing that way like I'm looking John Holt only finding the drone John Holt only searching for like the drone and John Holt finding the drone and basically Jumbo doing all that quickly and like Jumbo will only finding something off the like the drone so like my person the reaction so like when Jumbo will be finding quickly finding like the drone like at that point like the drone being in like to a certain bit of like extent of like a messed up situation. Maybe it's like out of covering of something might do that thing that can understand of the situation. So like that's creating a certain extent of like a suspicious feeling within like Jumbo at that point is like a possible take that afterwards. So like Jumbo without telling anyone actually like tightening up the screws and basically putting that covering that on like the drone is like the scenario that I'm putting in. Jumbo quickly bring out taking out like the drone and leaving that drone and then like to be only at that point that's like the boardman would be like even shockingly remembering about like the drone of the film because like I'm looking like in like the previous night I'm looking for like after like the boatman had taken like the life of like the drone operator, like the boatman's intent might have been to like then to ensure to like thoroughly mess up like the drone and to like totally put back like the covering of like the drone and to make it seem as if like it has not been tampered with and that way to that trick sort of come into that seeing that basically the drone has gone damage will be so that like they won't be able to like use the drone. It's like my primary impression for that the what and to like that they put like the most things at like such many disadvantages question where they won't be able to like use the drone might have been like the boardman's plan depending on the drone. So like I'm thinking like it might have been chosen like seeing like the boardman and like that might have like destroyed all the plan of like the boardman and might have resulted in like the boatman totally forgetting to like totally do all that to like the drone is definitely very much. So like I'm doing that way like once the scenario that I'm doing for like jump hope to like leave out from that room within like the boat with like the with like the drone with its like out of covering like fixed up and basically at that point John Ho in the front like with like John Ho would be like by now after like seeing like the that drone operator operating like the drone that Abdul like John Ho because in that time might have been paying that sharp observation to that while the drone operator was like operating the drone until this point. So like I'm doing like with that confidence John Ho attempting to like operate the drone and like the scenario that I'm preparing. So like at that point itself, I'm preparing like about maintaining Junho that basically that like Junho is not a drone operator like basically the it's like extremely risky for like Junho to like use the drone and basically like the drone falls into like the scene, it might get damaged and all that would be along the lines and so the boardman repeatedly trying to like convince Junho to like operate the drone. So like I'm still Junho not listening and Junho only operating the drone and basically while sending the drone flying to the ground and then the like at that point jump out without much delay and like jump out of the talking with finding and land tops the floating tops of like the drone operator like the scenario that I'm doing and definitely especially since like jump out and at that point since like jump out bit totally shocked so like at that point I'm like jump out like at that point since the boatman would be totally seeing that through the visual so like I'm feeling like the boatman straight away telling Gunho that basically it might have been a sharp that that might have resulted in like the he might have gone like the boatman might have felt overboard and basically then might have been attacked by a shark to the along the lines of the boatman at that point he was desperately trying to like uh uh desperately would be telling like Jungho at that point. But like I'm believing definitely since like Jungho is like was like police officer and the different definitely has worked as a police officer definitely Jungho definitely would be even through like the camera of like the drone and like I'm looking like Jungho would be easily able to like see that it wasn't like the wound is not that of like an attack of like a shark or anything that like the wound is definitely basically due to like someone trying to like eliminate like the trauma right just by seeing like the wound itself like I'm thinking like jump off quickly to like of like the floating tops like I'm thinking jump off quickly being able to like figure that is like the scenario that I was like that would be like the point where like jump off to like suspicion beginning towards like the boatman is like the scenario that I'm trying jump off slowly turning against like the boatman would be like a friendly trying to like convince like Jumbo that might have been a sharp like definitely I'm thinking at that point would be like Jumbo totally like trying to like capturing like the boatman and basically like with that up you see the face and then an rich man of like asking like the boatman who are they like who is he with the along the lines and at that point is when like I'm still remembering for like the boatman that point like using his weapon and attacking Jumbo and basically quickly jumping out into the sea and trying to extend my way and basically getting captured by throwing any chain numbers of like Jumbo and getting brought back into like the boat at potentially like an in-person kind of like a situation and like being providing within a step to another the remembers. So yes, so like the main number from the reaction right now is that like the raw where like the top of like the drone operator has like right now was stuck in like on the spring. That rocks would be part of like this island, and that island would be like the studio island. This definitely might be very interesting. So like I'm preferring like definitely right now I'm preferring without much great delay at all. Like I'm preferring like the life of like the boatman getting found out by Jang Ho is like the scenario that I'm preferring. That they like Jang Ho and team that quickly like making it to like the studio, making it to and integrating into like the studio building is like the scenario, even the scenario that I'm referring. But still, I'm referring by then like the first two games will be over by then. It's definitely not it's like, I'm just, like it might be like during like the time when like the first two games. Once like the first two games will be over and like maybe before like the first two games during this time while like I'm doing like the VIPs as well, we'll be making it to like the studio building after like the was bringing to me just as like the VIPs will be making it to like the stadium building and definitely since like definitely able to bring like the VIPs won't be at all showing up to like the stadium either through like a ship or anything like definitely able to bring like it will be definitely through there will be a helipad and definitely it will be through the helipad that like through a helicopter that like the VIPs would be like showing up in like the building before stadium so like I'm doing definitely even that helicopter as well, like it would be that approaching the Stadium Island, that as the level were like uh, most likely like Junko and the totally noticing that as well. There's also definitely my friends because as well, and like that extreme suspicion would be, within like Junko at that point of like the work within that island that would be not far at the far that is not at a far distance from them, like the possibility of that island being like the to give island, which also the name of the reactor. So that is also like another scenario that I'm considering. So definitely I'm considering it so that way that it will be like after like the first game and before like the experience that I'm considering like Java and team would be making it to like the game island finally. So it's definitely my consideration. So like basically, according to my consideration, impression, if like the scenario ends up being that Jang Ho and team even before realizing that like basically the boatman is like a traitor, like it ends up eventually ends up being like through like the helicopter approaching of like the DF is approaching like Game Island that like if like Junko and team eventually ends up having that suspicion of like the possibility of like that island being like Game Island. If that instead ends up being like the scenario, then I'm going to like Junko straight away at that point ordering like the boatman to take the to that exact island and that I'm going to got my extremely reluctantly taking the point to that island. They are also like the according to my representation like the top of like the drone operator as well would be one the short as well. It's the like the person is definitely also my representation. So like at that point I'm looking like the boatman like so like at that point, I'm referring if that's the case, then I'm referring the scenario to be like once like Janho and they would be making it to like the game island and would be like exploring into like this game island and trying to find out like where that helicopter had landed to the next island and while Janho and team would be like entering deep into like the studio island like at that point at that point I'm referring like the government to be starting like support and I was wondering like the boatman just leaving that island successfully my friend. So like the sound of like the boat leave the sound of the train and most likely Jack and the others like from a distance within that island would be like hearing it, like there's another that I was looking at for a day and then definitely setting back and checking out and at that point them getting that absolute twist of like that absolute shock. Seeing a realization that like the boat and within that time was like a traitor. So like then as like Jump and team would be exploring that island berperan like jump out and take talking is having like the next software like they were saying like the what so focus of like the ground operator is like for scenario that so then I'm just bringing X and if that's the scenario then I'm just bringing as like the boatman would be if that way taking away like the boat and basically escaping from the studio island then I'm just bringing like at that point itself like the boatman will be straight away phoning and calling and informing info. If the citizens lack info right now, if lack has a plan back to that the position of like the front line definitely that's the one straight away calling info and informing info about like House and team like integration to like the game island. It's also like a possibility that another positive that I'm doing that way. Info being once again being able to like be prepared for that incoming attack, infiltration attack like Jumbo and thing. It's also like about that I'm doing. So like if that's the case, then I'm looking like even while like the boatman will be like frantically like phoning and revealing this like detail to that info. Still, considering that info would be that's only unaware of like there being a team B to like John host team because like the boatman at that point would be thinking for it and basically so like the boatman totally forgetting to like tell info about like the team John host team not just being like John host team but like the also existing a team B as well. It's also the legal friends. It might be only maybe like the officers alone that will be that while info was like uh while Info was like playing as like a Squid Game candidate in like potential boxing games, like it might be then like so it might be that the officer alone like during that time like the conversation might have been between like the government and like the officers before like the government had set up from like the mainland to search for like Squid Game either like Janko. It's definitely one career ambition. So like maybe during then like the conversation might be between like the officers and that yeah, Boardman's definitely coming through. So like I'm sure maybe like it's doing like job which is fellow that would be then aware of like the team thing in terms of having a team it's also like a propositive that I'm looking or like I'm looking or like the propositive that I'm looking for like the scenario to be that the Neil right now trying to like save that that's like father sleeping candidate like while Neil will be trying to like escape with him like I'm looking like the officer getting informed about like the situation and like that way like the officer leaving like Mr. Game building along with like a bunch of game workers to like capture New York and they will need to eliminate the intent to like eliminate New York and they will need to that way to that as like a punishment to that basically also that while keeping like to attack New York while keeping New York alive and basically to that way that to do that the organ trading with like both Neo as well as like the person the second candidate that Neo had saved would be along the lines and that way so that also prevent like Neo to escape and basically that way like through such a manner like I'm looking like maybe like the office of along with like a bunch of Sugian candidates like leaving the Sugian building and basically searching the Sugian island at that point for like Neo it's like also like a to that episode. Maybe it's been during this time that like Jang Ho and team infiltration into like the Studio Island, into that they became Studio Island will be happening. It's also the claim number for Anderson. So and so that on the different because of that like a maybe that the boatman while making his betrayal and leaving like the Studio Island with like a getting from the Studio Island with like his boat like a person different navy like the boatman informing Inho and not like the officer. It's also like about that and maybe like the boatman thinking that basically by now that he might be able to like contact Inho. But like I'm the boatman will be thinking along the lines that like this is like Inho like that absolute main leader of like the games and everything like so definitely like definitely I'm whispering maybe like at that point like the boatman in his like mind totally healing us to like straight away just call info and tell that that social detail about like John Ho and Finn, like basically infiltrating into like the island, just like the initial problem scenario that I'm looking right. So like that way, like the boatman phoning and telling info, and that way, like the boatman forgetting to like tell info about like the TNT of John Ho, and like that way, info shortly on realizing this like info totally preparing for just like John Ho and John Ho's team infiltration into like the Stadium Island yeah, into like CDML tech. So like I'm sort of like while Janko and I'm also for like while like the office of and like Avengers came out of we're trying to like capture Neo like I'm thinking them initially making it towards like Neo and I'm like theory like I'm just like possibly a scenario and Neo definitely would be doing her to just to like fight back still. I'm just like eventually it being a scenario where like Neo and like that father could be a candidate either getting into like a corner kind of like a situation or like I'm just in that and but the current act will be during like the exchange of like the weapon attack like that and the current like that power of the game candidate might end up uh, accidentally end up getting eliminated like the scenario that I'm doing. But like the case of Neol like at that point I'm just Navy for like Neol getting cornered by like the officer and like the other and his like helium worker. So like at that point, I'm running the office of Williams telling me all that basically that that like basically at that point I was probably maybe that them at that point like the office of Williams basically maybe telling me all that he's going to keep me all alive and basically for like the organ transportation and everything will get on the line him totally related me all at that point is like the scenario that we can as like the officer who is about to use this weapon on Neo in such a manner like I'm doing right before that like I'm maybe seeing when like the team of like Jam Hopes and like this team that basically would be attacking would be seeing this happening to the chief and would be like straight away attacking like the officer and his team of like senior of and taking that out to like the scenario that I was that way through Janko and things like entrance like I was doing like New York getting saved and that way like New York even though New York would be extremely disturbed by like the death of like the father of school candidate like still like I'm looking like John Ho like Sophie seeking like Neil's that help at that point is like the scenario that I'm doing. Definitely I'm looking like John Ho at that point would be like seeing like the officer while he would be showing up I'm still thinking in the member generation as well like the scenario to be like the officer trying to take a civilian worker of life and that civilian worker being New so trying to like attack like the silver water and that silver water being Neo. So like I'm doing definitely Janho would be probably seeing that Neo would be of use to that Janho. That Neo framework. So definitely that way through the interaction with like Neo, like I'm doing that Janho being able to like feel a certain element of like goodness and genuinity within like Neo is also definitely a framework. So and luckily, John Hall was also seeing how much like a studium worker like Neo would be like extremely disturbed and like sad over like the death of like a studium candidate like the great name of like the deal with the father. So like definitely that way like John Hope would be like okay thing Neo and John Hope would be like okay seeking Neon help and is Neon totally that way will be helping John Ho out with their infiltration into like the stadium building and everything. It's like the scenarios that I'm moving. So like even and since quantum observation like at that point like in how we were fully aware of like such an inspiration by John Ho and his team due to like the government phoning like even before that phoning right before that like phoning like info and revealing about the stuff, but like the government will be escaping from this game island. So like I'm thinking like that way, info will be totally prepared, has taken from money to totally prepared. So like I'm thinking that way, info and his like team of studio must have like all foreign, starting to like all Janko and his like team during that whole fight. And I'm thinking like it will be at that point that like I'm thinking like info and his teams to game was like totally finally cornering done for escape or foreign and cornering done for escape and understand maybe thinking at that point that like getting that but the surfaces of of like a scenario where like the TVP of that Janho at that point will be making it to the Instagram island and would be infiltrating into like the building and making it to that exact location. So like I'm going to attack happening at that way. Janho and his like team who will be like corner at that point will be like retaliating at that point. It's like the scenarios that are so like I'm different like definitely like Janho at that point that the first happening was like Janho revealing to that the format that because like my very impression for like the scenario being like and the like it only being at that point that like this scene to be related like the scenario that I'm referring where like the activity of like the situation might have been that about the map and those like after like the boatman would be escaping betraying like Jungho and the others and escaping from like the Squid island. Like at that point, like Jungho straight away would be having a like phone with him. So like Jungho would straight away realizing that like the boatman is like a traitor and Jungho would straight away like phoning like the team B of like Jungho. And about the time like Jungho straight away telling the team B that like their captain so is like a traitor but to not eliminate captain so but to like threaten captain so into that taking them to like the Stygian island would be along the lines of the curriculum like jump over the morning and telling to the team B might not go to the team B at that point. It's like that twist of the career is happening at that point of like with another and that way like the team B uh being able to like make it in time to like their infiltration to like the city and then to their infiltration to like civilian building. And that way, like I'm thinking like maybe for such a scenarios will where like uh that way once like the team B would be making their attack on like the civilian workers of like info. At that point, like collectively them being strong enough to like offer that info studio workers and remaining studio workers and team and basically at that point that coupled with like by then like soldier as well as Sanjon as well it will once again making the next rebellion. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for. Like if info in like the present like basically as like punishment for like the initial rebellion they hope like then those different like they hope won't be like part of like that rebellion of like Sangyong and Sojin at that point. But like if info doesn't take the light, like the person doesn't take the light was straight out, then I was going like during that rebellion, definitely they hope as well being part of like Sangyong and Sojin tail of like a rebellion at that point. It will be just the three of them. Or like the two of the Sangyong and Sojin matter. And like that way that their rebellion as well at that point. Resulting in like meeting up with like the exact location during that exact time with like the team of like Janho and all of them that Janho and Janho's team A and B and all of them. And so like that way them totally finally cornering like the front man like the scenario that I'm going to bring. So like I'm just bring like at that point I'm just like would you and like enforce like the front man would be like a defeated kind of level situation where like I'm just bring like info would be like I'm still thinking the manager impression that like info even at that point won't be even afraid or even concerned about like getting cornered or even getting upset by Janko and all. Especially when the like it won't be about like us that like fear of info will be having, especially when the because like info will be absolutely extremely confident in that like his black powers and influence would be able to like get him out even if we get after the then info will be thing. So like I'm looking at really Sangyon present like this entire time like all the way from like Sangyon entering into like sessions in this game to even in 2024, like Sanjo's like persistent presence and basically after like the 2022 game, like the fact that Sanjon had basically consistently without letting go, without like getting demotivated, had basically consistently that continuous his like fight against like Info against like the entire WWE game to bring down the games and that fight even resulting in like Info ending up in that fight situation would be like a great discovery to that Info especially when return by extreme lack of like Sanjon, which like would be like the way Info is seeing it as not Sanjon skills or like Sanjon thrillers, but like so solely as like lack of repeatedly favoring Sanjon into that situation ending up into like such a situation for like Info and even then like Sangon still being alive to like even see that. So definitely the only deep down in for info at that point while getting cornered by Sanjon and that Sanjo and the Gender thing that's like the scenario that I'm doing. And even at that point like the only fear and disturbance within info would be just connected to like Sanjon and Sanjon alone. So like I'm saying would be like desperate to like ensure to like eliminate Sanjon. So like I was saying at that point like info will be telling Java and all of them that like he's totally like that they can arrest him, but like after like one more good game between like the front man and like Sangyeon will be along the line in hope of returning at that point to like Sangyeon. So like I'm just like at that point I was trying like that way like I'm just like that final showdown fight happening like Squid game happening where like I'm still in another dimension for that final Squid game between like just Sangyeon as well as like Info alone being exactly the different most likely being exactly the very same as like the sixth game in 2020 between like Sangyeon and Kangwoo. And in that game, I was like in Guni, like even though Sangyeon straight away would be like seriously awkward, getting awkward in that out of seriously getting out the point by Info index that it's just good game. I'm going to bring like definitely eventually I'm supposed to will be like by in order like thoroughly defeating Sangyeon in that good game like I'm going to like it to be at that point like in order be like revealing just like justifying in order like realistic kind of like ideologies and everything and that would be like totally out of the rage of like Sangyeon hearing that ideology that would be giving Sangyeon the strength to like fight back and I'm going from that point on like Sangyeon totally turning like the tide of the battle and definitely totally for indicating, you know. And then I'm multiplying that Sangyeon would be like currently repeating in both like the point where Rainbow will totally badly injured and won't be even at all able to like even make the injuries like the scenario that I'm looking at. Sanjon at that point, like it would be like an elimination kind of like it would be also like an elimination game of like Squid Game where like info like the one who failed would be getting eliminated, especially when the Korean versus. So like I'm looking like after like Sanjon will be defeating info but different like the game workers like who will be putting their with their weapons to be or not all using their weapons and that would be send that. So like I'm looking Sanjon only at that point like mocking like this game workers that they are totally along the lines as if like mocking like the studio workers that basically what like so if their master loses like they can totally bend the rules and basically that their master doesn't have to get eliminated like basically it's just like the greatest game along the lines of the Sangon mocking like info as well as like the foreign man info as well as like the studio workers as well as the entire game and another like Sangon during that making that speech during that point and at that point, Sanjon opening then walking like in them as well. Who I'm still remember to remember would in actuality would be like the father of like the actual father of Influence. Like it's also definitely very much so definitely that whole piece from Sanjon eventually resulting in like in 440 at that point, like finally breaking and these levels like it was like um absolute like extreme or confident body language and like extreme confident like facial expression and calm and compose that body language and facial all that would be breaking at that point. I think always only that absolute fear would be like very much visible in that info at that point for like everyone who need like watches that game between still game between like Sangyong and you know at that point is like the scenario that I'm looking and that way exactly like the Rakiti guy on losing to like Sangyong had ended up dying about referring like in the very same similar manner like in Ho as well after like losing to like Sangyong like ending up dying like the scenarios that I'm doing, and that way like Sanyon achieving his like a small portion of his goal of like really putting an end to like the Squid Games in like Sanjon's country alone. Definitely will around that. Definitely after that like Sanjon will be like still not giving up and will be setting off to like America with like the intent to like stop like millions in like America and basically Sanjon's ultimate goal would be effectively to travel across like the world and find out all the countries who have like festival should be taking place and to put an end to like each and every single one of like engagement. It will be like Sanjay's goal and with that goal like I'm becoming Sanjay totally after like putting an end to like games in his country like Sanjay heading off to like America to also in the process to like meet his daughter as well in America. So also like finish the scenario that I'm sitting on the one right. So like but main story of the show right now as from like chosen right now I think Sanjay about like okay, like definitely able to bring right now so it will be totally feeling that they will one will feeling that like right Sangeon was like going through the very same exact kind of like suffering that and would be on like the very same boat as like children as like when the suffering that children had gone through while youngly like children like great from that the youngly had died and that was in front of like children. Definitely going to remember so like I'm looking that fair trauma kind of like the feeling would be what like children would be right now feeling towards like Sanjon right now that live in Pyramid and this this point definitely bringing Sanjon and children a whole lot closer especially with the Pyramid regardless of how much that info would be trying to like instill that fear into the speaking candidates about like about like and trying to make them not start like another rebellion of the definitely like while info succeeding in instilling that fear when it comes to like the almost like the entire like the remaining like student candidates like I'm definitely if like in fact like nothing will eliminate take hope then I was looking like take hope as well that definitely that guilt and regret looking like take hope will like would just living in that take hope being part of like that eventual rebellion next rebellion of like Sangyon where like definitely Soyo as well as like Sangyon as well as take hope will be part of will be like the only three that will be part of that rebellion especially by the three and Russia and since like children doesn't know electrogenically would be like probably unaware of that Sanjon having gone through that the very same suffering as that of that children losing that young me, not just now with like Sanjon losing young Bay, but also has with like Sanjon like with us having lost it's that good friend in that whole in that whole rebellion that I think that had to place in like Sanjong's like own workplace that there as well Sanjong losing his like friend, like considering that loss of like Sanjong's friend, good friend back then as well might have and uh, he might have been like different like kind of like totally like Sanjong's gun day like that like Sanjong had told you like in during like right before I think like the Fox began in like 2020 like I'm looking that the Marcus began like I'm looking that like I'm looking that friend of like Sanjong back then who might have been totally like a gun based to like Sanjong and looking he might be like the friend of like Sanjong that might have died in that rebellion thing like Sanjong's like workplace in that or factory or something like basically in that decimal and then like I'm looking then it suffering of Sanjong connecting to like Sanjong losing touch the purchase friend might have been through song was that in that 2020 final game elected sixth game elected then like the next very same kind of like a trauma and suffering that song was which is going through there right now with like the loss of like young day. This is definitely what might be like the actuality of like the extent of like suffering of like Sanjay's like life so far about which like social media not be unaware of. But it's definitely mandatory. Although that name still feeling remember the same, so that like Thanos would definitely be that alive, still alive, which definitely monitoring but so like entering the scenario to be that of the different like once like the workers will be about to perform like that surgery for like the organ transplantation on like the father switching candidate like and right before that like Neo would be taking out all those Squid Game workouts, and then going like to be at that point that Neo will be like shockingly, and at that point like Neo will be totally attempting to like, escape and leave that home with like that power to be generated. But like right before that, episode, like Neo will be hearing like the sound of someone, and that would be the sound of Thanos definitely will bring because like I'm the like definitely in like that whole class in that whole fight between like the different guy and Thanos like I'm the like definitely, even though Thanos is badly injured, like Thanos still might have not ended up getting eliminated. Definitely not the Revolution. So definitely, and Thanos might have been also been for like the organ transplantation surgery. It's definitely one of the thing. But like it might be during that right before performing that surgery on Thanos might have been when like like the rebellion of like Thanos might have began, and that way straight away like the studio workers might have had to like basically stop and basically straight away go up to like they might have been only caught by like officers at that point to that report to the main operation might have been what might have happened definitely not in that way like the surgery on Thanos might have not happened and that way like Thanos the super maybe still person there in like that operation room so definitely not so like I'm looking at that was for that right now with like Neo deciding to like being able to like go up to like the operation room like at that point like the it will be just like the surgery of like that father to give candidate alone that would be like about to begin but like also that surgery of like Thanos as well might have been about to begin at that point because like I'm this year like I'm looking like they might have only learned or workers might have only learned from like their experience in like that virtual studios that I'm looking like this year there will be like a great number of dogs with game workers. Doctors and like the game workers definitely the trend so like solely connecting to that solely for like the reasons of like the organ transportation is definitely the trend because definitely like these multiple doctors will be about to Dr. Surima will about to perform like the surgery. So we at that point that like in the order would be that using Oriana Peterly would be that for that would be that using her weapon and taking them out that was scenario that I'm doing. So like that way, as like Neo would be about to like escape from like the power Syrian candidate, like Neo hearing like the voice of like Thanos as well, a better than Thanos as well. So that way like I was like Neo like helping Thanos as well. And basically along with like Thanos as well as like and Thanos by now might have recovered to a certain extent as well, significant. So like I was wondering like that way around like Thanos as well as like the Falcon kidney candidate. Possibly that being another possibility as well, like how Neol will be attending while Neol will be attending her escape like in taking on the good like the Falcon kidney candidate, but also with like Thanos as well. It's also like a possibility that I'm thinking maybe I'm looking like through like might have been like so like I'm pretty like due to like the effects of that thing that like Thanos was like eating repeatedly that all those effects coming on Thanos basically Thanos being so that extremely afraid like the effects of that coming on like Thanos like not having his like usual confidence in Thanos right now. Especially even after like the attack, extreme attack from that then Bitcoin guy, like Thanos in like the person only being in an afraid kind of like a mindset. Where Thanos right now totally feeling that aspect there, and like the only thing in Thanos' mind would be that being totally so like a fear from that would be meaning that way. Thanos pleading for like the help of like Neo and like the father fully rendered it, and that way like them totally also taking Thanos as well with them for like their attempt to like escape out of like the civilian building. It's also like an individual possible scenario that happens in the Oh, so like the name of the episode right now is as for like the call that basically at like the front man in both place right now. Number the current like a bunch of multiple possibilities for like from that call might be. Number the current my prediction is for like that call being from like it was like officer. It's definitely the current which is so like the officer calling in for hope. Basically, right now, we like the person would do like the office update on that would be having like that will be able to like for like that teleport in like that in like that place of like the front map info. Continuing with the language. So like maybe in like the office of that will be calling info and basically telling info about like the teams of that Janko haven't like made it to like the Squid Game Island. This is like one possibility that I'm looking for. Like so, like I'm just from like maybe it might have been through like especially since like basically in like the process where like Jumbo had gone where in like the sport like since like the of like the drone operator watching a show on the like a rock that rocks will be part of like this huge island which should be definitely the Squid Game Island. That's definitely the rank. So and this might be also the reason for like the boardman like getting more and in like the person right now like the boardman being so extremely kind of like worried with like body language and everything. It's definitely my personal relationship might not just be like just be about like the him trying to like only him desperately trying to like manipulate jump and all of stuff connecting to like the government taking the life of like the operator and trying to hide it like but like couldn't just take cooler to that but like it might be also having to do with like basically that with them like Jumbo and all of them being so close to like the original to be like ending up being so close to them to be it's also like talking to them and so definitely, those are like since like the streets were like extremely stormy. Like I think like the previous night itself, like those are like so like all that stormy seas might also something like basically even like the students like Portland like basically having like not being able to like thrive like accordingly like he might have planned. So like I'm just going like that way he might have ended up with, and especially with like the explosion strategy as well of like the government as well. So they failing. Like I mean, definitely from that point on, like there might have been no more path ahead other than towards like the stood leading towards like the actual original game and it's also like a public development. So like I'm sure maybe that's what man even taking that hope and the other to that island that like person was might have been out of like the water extreme or confident in that person Raji might totally work and wipe out that the entirety of that jump point from his team. Like be along the lines like the government might have had that effort or confidence and it might be just that effort or confidence that like might be like the combined that strategy of just like the boatman and like the opposite side on the living through. So like the officers might have not at all been able to been willing to like basically set up like the trap island of like the explosives not extremely far travel far out of the game island and set up such a trap island. Like the officers might have not been willing. So like even the officer as well might have had that up or confidence. So like he might have set up that trap island at like a location close to like this game and might have been what might have happened. Definitely with direction. Assuming that like that sprite will totally work and basically Jammu and when that thing would be getting eliminated. It's new. So like I'm with that failing, with that attempt failing and then hope and like the majority of the screen like surviving. Definitely, like the only path ahead would be towards like this to be a minor, especially my position. So which like urban boardman might not, and that might be the reason for like the boardman that in a confirmly kind of like a manner like that's already trying to like change the John thing mind to like basically to go back or something to it. After that expert inside right the boardman has changed, especially also my membership. So definitely like the currently like the person like the rocks of like the drone operator like working it on this like about rock like consider that software based on the connected to selective identity capability to CMI and certainly on the remote. So definitely was like one of like journals team members even saying that is for them to like make to go up to like the nearest island and basically to find another drone operator like a business so that way like that point team might go straight away. That might also be right now. Might have straight away proceeded ahead towards that island that was like so close to that where Johnson and team was basically that way, like once like Jamhar team had entered into like that island, like straight away, like the roadman might have phoned like the officer and might have told the officer about like Jamhar team has infiltrated into the Instagram island, and so like right now it might be like the call from like the officer to like info about like the incoming infiltration by Jamhar and his team. Is like one possibility that is only for and the other possibility that I was recording is for like the current fraud detection host in Latin host like from Mangrove. Maybe it's being from like once again like the officer himself, but like connecting to like the officer being extremely disappointed even though info is like the frontline and the person running the experience still like the officer would be like the close friend of that info in actually because they were the so like I'm given maybe like the current fraud being from like the officer info where like the call would be that of where like the officer would be extremely disappointed in like info and would be like frustrated with like info's decision for like conducting that the revoting even after like the and because like I'm definitely that at the because I was referring like the officer might have been only looking forward to that info turning like this whole rebellion by Shanjon and others to that to that the advantage by taking away the option of that and using that against uh, and making it compulsory for like swimming and from this point on to like play the entire like the games as like in a way as and putting it and calling it like a punishment for like the rebellion that way so that like literally the officer who might be extremely greedy for money that he might have been only hoping for that way so that like once like the realities will be showing up that they will be able to make even more money so like I'm just bringing the fact that like right now it was still decided to like give the option of like rewarding like I'm bringing that the office up right now might be extremely disappointed and angry with like info for like setting up such a decision. It will definitely not the repetition. This might be that to change to that take out this like anger and frustration out on like info and to like that way to that to to be like the call from like the officer to like change info mind to take away like the option of a real voting or like to express the anger for like info being the reason to like revoting and like the rejected might be the reason for like the call right now to towards like the front info right now from like the officer. It's like these are like the possibilities that I'm doing like about the reimbursement right. So like definitely my position to reimbursement right now is that for like the trillion candidates even after like the rebellion having that the option of like revoting like I was definitely in this like current revoting like I was bring the majority of like the Indian candidates that voting to that indeed to the so definitely my position and definitely it will be so first of all it will be due to like uh, 35, I think, like civilian candidates like having got eliminated through like the special civilians as well as like the rebellion collectively with like right now it's being revealed that like 35 civilian candidates have been eliminated and like basically since like that much more money now being added to like that order sum of money in like the last few like so like all civilian candidates haven't seen this and basically also with like the extreme retail scare of like the of like scare and trauma of like the special school day which took place just now. That coupled with like the rebellion attempt of like Sangha and like the was as well to that ending up just like failure and everything. Like I'm looking collectively right now, like I'm looking like overall like the mindset of like the majority of like the Indian candidates would be to like just leave the game to the like whatever money that they can take home. Who's definitely will bring so like they will bring in like a rewarding and bring like the majority of the Indian candidates will be voting to like leave the games and that way the civilians get being over with like with like the Prince game after like the Windows game that with that like I'm gonna the Prince game being like the final game in like the little for game. It's like the possibilities that I'm considering as of right now. It's definitely my birthday. So that I'm considering that also of that and I'm considering my considering of like why inverse even doing this like I'm considering like definitely the extremely villanistic info would be that totally might have decided to like basically not to like eliminate Sangor, but to like give that absolute in a way as if to like take that absolute revenge on like Sangyon, like to give that absolute punishment for like Sangyon for like the past 3 years of like Sangyon like consistent attempt to like capture info and to put an end to like the for like Sangyon to to punish Sangyon for that by through such a manner by totally destroying and crushing all hopes of like Sanjo within like certain within the possibilities of like basically putting an end to like the students even if like Sanjo is like within like the game like that attempt on Sanjo to like that hope of like that Sanjo had like put an end to like the game like to crush and destroy that hope of like Sanjo in while keeping Sanjo alive in like an extremely painful and suffering manner would be like number like it might be along such line like a like that league info might have plan the name of the members. So that this might be the so this might have been maybe like the plan of info all the way from like the beginning of like the 2024 studios once like Sangha had like told info in that limo saying that he wants to entering like the 2024 studios. The league might be very interesting right now. So that way to crush all the hopes of like Ranjan in being able to like put an end to like decision and that way to force Sangyo to basically to live with that absolute memories of all that sufferings of like Sangyo for the rest of Sangyo's life. Like this might have been like what like in hope might have been strictly decided as like the absolute punishment and revenge against like Sangyo, especially in so like right now the in hope as well to be totally even setting up a revoting even right now so it's like definitely I'm looking who is only expecting in this like current revoting definitely the majority of like Indian candidates will be like only spread up and might be just wanting to like leave the games and that way like the majority for the majority of the Indian candidates to like vote the games and leave the games would be definitely what like saying hopefully that's totally absolutely expecting to definitely concurrent and that exactly happening like also of my very and the only other possibility, or remote possibility that I'm looking for, like maybe like right now, they are being also like an announcement by like CPM workers where like he will be telling like the civilian candidates that like in the revoting this time there will be there's like a difference and basically as for like the being like a consequence for like the rebellion Indian candidates learning like the rebellion and like the consequences like the punishment of like this them having like the option to like leave the games but through like the rewarding but them not being able to like they won't be able to like leave with like the reward money they can choose to like vote and leave the games but they won't be able to like leave with like the reward money getting split up with them like they won't be able to like leave the games but like they won't be able to like take any of like the reward money with them with like the consequence will be along the lines of the thing are really happening either before like the rewarding or like after like the rewarding like in a twist kind of like a manner like I'm like such a really happening and I was wondering that way all of them getting extremely angry towards like Sanjon at that point so like the scenario that I was right and so like that's one of the reimbursement it that like a reveal happens that basically the candidate to like both to like lose again but won't be able to like take the reward money with them then according to my preparing question such the result happens before like the rewarding then I'm looking that as well possibly being according to like impose decision against the kind of decision where like how they absolutely suffer as confident that basically since like or the entire candidate had like that good hope of being able to each and every single game in like 2024 of like being able to leave the games with like a certain extent of like the reward money for them to like all of the sudden have all of that hopes of like being able to like leave with like a certain extent of like the reward money instantly getting taken away from them like that will be totally causing an extreme shift in like the collective mindset of the Brazilian candidates who will be like probably at that point will be definitely not at all intending at all to like leave the games, but to like continue like the game to like the very end. It's definitely what like maybe like the other there or like what like who might be like realistically planning right now. So it's like the rewarding. It's like the other possibility that I'm looking at. That way, like I'm looking at that point, like the officer who would be like who might be like the person who might have right now would be like falling in like the front man info in like the front man for the so that way, like the officer at that point realizing that what like info was doing this and that time by still giving the still giving an addition of the working it's like the other possibility that I'm looking for this right and my position. Okay, so that's the name of the real information right now is that even with like the boatman right now that falling and speaking to like the frontman in who that I'm still whispering definitely about like the Trap Island where like the explosion happened. Basically, which might have definitely be intended to like wipe out like the entire team of like not only Jumbo team but also Jumbo. Definitely that Trap Island setup might have been definitely not according to like the orders of Team Hurt. This definitely might have been remembered. Like the or definitely I'm assuming that might have been an order not given by info, but like that might have been probably a stealthy and secret order given to let the boatman by the officer without info realizing definitely what might have happened. Definitely the even before like Janho and the others had set off to like find like the Sweden island like I'm something like when before that I'm assuming it might have been like the officer that might have phone like the boatman like the officer herself might know the boatman and might have like the number so that the boatman like even before that might have been like the officer that might have phoned like the boatman about and informed them about like those like trap island party to that eliminate the chance of because like I'm looking that maybe the officer might have only figured out about like jump hope not getting eliminated by info. Also definitely know with the ram. So like jump hope that resulting in like jump hope still being alive and like resulting in like jump hope bring this like whole team to like find like game island and then again like after maybe of like about that like maybe that officer might have been a Squid Game worker with like the uniform back when like info back in like 2020 and basically use the weapon on like Janho's back in like 2020 from like the top of like that cliff where like Janho that way had survived like this movie. Back then like I'm looking like among like one of like the Squid Game workers in like radio info was with like info the frontman info on that like one of those Squid Game workers might have been like the second day officer. It's also like a possibility that I'm given. So like the officer maybe so they totally feeling confused as to like why info is giving all this like special treatment to Janho. It's definitely also amazing the culture. So definitely like and like that officer would be totally seeing Janho as like a nuisance and basically like so like a music that way it might have been like a secret or that might have happened without like knowledge might have happened towards like the broadband way back before like the 2020 was really began that a secret call might have happened or like towards like the broadband by officers where like the officer might have told like promised like the broadband like a handsome sum of money in exchange for like the boatman keeping this detail hidden from info about like the trap island setup to basically eliminate Janko. And basically it might be like and for like then after like the elimination of Janko for like the boatman to like totally make up some sort of like an excuse of like and to like friend info as to like how like Janko had got eliminated would be along the lines of like secret plan between like the officer as well as like the government might have happened without like any option knowledge. Just game of the surrender. So like even while in right now like the person tells like the bond to like ensure that like um that they don't make it to like this game either. before like the Squid Game of like 2024 ends. Like I'm just even by saying that like in his point of view, it would be only would have only intended for like the government to like if possible like basically eliminate with that absurd step like take out like the remaining of like Janto's things except for that Janto or to like basically for like the government to like just manipulate and trick like Janto and Janto's entire team and to manipulate them and waste time and just stall time until like the students of like 2024 will be over. This would be like the only two possible things that I'm looking like into with the right now events intended by giving this order to like the government right now. Definitely Michael Derry and okay, so like the main is very interesting right now is that for like the front man seems to giving the order to like the government it seems doesn't work out. So like no go illness and how when I'm looking at that I'm still thinking about when some would be totally out of like in-house like confidence or confidence and like that hope that they will if things doesn't work out for like the boatman and basically with that the truth if like the boatman truth about like the boatman being a traitor gets like found out by Chan and brother like at that point definitely involved be having that absolute confidence that that the boatman definitely won't be able to like take them all out but instead it would be like the boatman that might end up getting eliminated or getting interrogated would be along the lines of the protecting that it would be that when fully aware. So like I'm thinking how we talking then by giving this order to like the boatman in who will be only having that absolute it will be only intended to like trick the boatman into like continuing like the boatman like the orders given to the boatman by info to ensure that the games like continues on and is to ensure that the game Jungman team doesn't make it to like the Junior Island before like the game end up being off completed or like through like the rewarding before like Sanjon and the others like leave the game and everything that was from before it comes to ensure that like the boatman doesn't end up to ensure that like Jumbo and the others doesn't end up making it to like the C game and it would be along the lines of the only to ensure that like I'm just going definitely info right now might be like self that up to self will be like manipulating and trying to fix the boatman and giving the order to like eliminate Jumbo as well as like all of them if like things doesn't work out for him while in activity who we totally expecting for like things doesn't work out. The only thing would be happening would be like the board manager getting interrogated or like eliminated by Janko and all of that. And basically like still even at that point like without like the boardman like Janko and those should be having to like find another a whole another boardman and then like definitely by the time they will be finding a whole another boardman and trying to like find like the game and by then definitely yeah. And at that point, like even that boardman will be having like absolutely no knowledge at all of like the city of that all. So like definitely by the time like Janko and others will be able to like get another boardman and will be able to like make it to like the Squid Game and like definitely by then like the Squid Game will be definitely follow will be along the lines of that absolute confidence or confidence that basically Info will be having and solely due to this reason I'm like Info right now giving the order to like the boardman to that if it doesn't work out in like an next January 20. It's definitely my cousin Serenas. So like the Kenyan split in the with Serenas for like the Crab Island explosion. Like that like about that that definitely will be not according to like the orders of Info, but might have definitely only according to like the orders of like the secret orders of like the officers above is like Info will be aware of this movement oh, yes, like the name of the production right now, as well like content right now, seeing with the plus and on willing to like I'm really fit before like this video marker would be done with like countdown like the sound of the shouting out like he wants to vote the name of the rep. That's like the scenario that I'm saying. The name of the like the last thing Chandra would be wanting to like would be to like okay waste away his like precious vote to lead the games, especially the Rangers. So definitely like those London right now would be totally zoned out and the first like even definitely might be zoned out and the first like I mean still that at like the countdown will be almost about to be over as like the game was only like counting down all the way to like number one like at that point of the countdown like at that point I'm current Sandra totally snapping out of the time Sandra shouting out that he wants to vote and Sandra totally voting to that indeed the game, like the scenario that I'm looking at. After making that first vote, like I'm looking like Sanjon standing there and basically making a speech to with that absolute passion, like I'm talking like Sanjon, that absolute seriousness and absolute passion and absolute desperation I'm looking at Sanjon. So he's pleading and begging to that all the many student candidates to vote to leave the game. There is the scenario that I'm looking about the like another trainer. So like regardless of how I seem to depressed Alexander right now in the movie, specifically connecting to like the depth of lecture where this but still San John would be like definitely would be right now doing like the voting and to like lead against definitely the scenario that I was remember. Audience are like definitely my to the infection right now and for like the rewarding only having the job than basically was like the front manager for order telling the officers that like the VIP should be arranging. I'm also friend definitely so like I'm still thinking about the remember that like there will be that twist happening towards like the end of like the revoting. You definitely remember members so definitely like in hopes like expecting like the VIP to show up like definitely in hope would be like okay have would have only would be definitely intended would be like only intended to like ensure that basically regardless of like the result of like the rewarding, the final result would be definitely the majority of the CK candidates continue to like play against like definitely must arrange. So like definitely right now I'm preparing like the usual scenario to be once like the revoting would be over. I'm still thinking about the and that like the revoting result would be definitely in like the favor of the CK candidates who wants to like lead the game. It's definitely my personal ambitions. But like I'm still at that point is when I was like the first being declared by the studio workers at that point that like basically since they had like the cooking candidates that launched like the rebellion that even though they have the voters to like basically leave the games that they will be able to like leave the games but like not with like their share of like the reward money like they won't be only able to like leave the games without taking any of like the reward money would be just like the scenario that I'm also totally correct. So that then like I'm going to the game of totally putting on that as the take care. This will be already pre-planned with the new and to buy and the orders might have given to buy to them to game of to do a with this bike and also the members. So that way at that point like the game of like totally putting on like I'm just taking and asking like the student candidates that they really if they want to continue with their decision of like the result of like their voting to leave the games of now. So like at that point of level when the majority of like the Korean candidates straight away shouting out to like the Korean workers that basically was they would be only extremely frustrated and angry and looking all of them would be like only looking towards like Sandro at that point. And they would be feeling us like this will be slowly lose to like Sandro and his like rebellion they don't like with like whatever money that they had the chance to like leave the game like they have lost it all so leading to like Sandro and right now have been ended up being in the situation where they have to like really play the entirety of like the city to be able to like leave with like the money. So like with only one of them being able to like leave with the money. That number super will be part of like the punishment that's that in the limit of the reimbursement that like I'm going like as part of it the punishment like I'm putting like once like the current voting process will be over. Like that is and the revelation that will be happening would be like they will be still given the chance to like leave the game not only right now through the rewarding, but even after like the good game, even after like the form as well as like the good games, and that they will be having like the option to like these the games, but like not with like the reward money, not but like they will be like leave empty handed. Will be along the lines of like a punishment kind of like a twist kind of like a review happening with me in that way like I'm doing like Squid Game ended is like all the majority of like the being so really frustrated and angry towards like Sanjeev. And basically with like the majority of them at that point like it's like the sudden shock of like the realization that like they won't be able to like only come like the game with like any of the money without them having to like complete like the game. So like I'm from that way like the majority of the game ended they come to the decision to like complete like the quickly come to the decision to like complete like the full entirety of the video. So like I'm literally like another voting not even happening. But I'm literally like the scenario being like this game worker at that point after making twist of like a reveal asking like the civilian uh candidates whether like they want to like leave empty handed or not. So like at that point, like the majority of like Indian candidates on the show, which are like shouting back at like this video not so bad, like they want to like they want to play like the all 6 games of like they want to continue and play all 6 games of like the season. At the end of the time, they'll be shouting at that point. It's like the scenario that I'm doing. And this shouting about the friend definitely will be something that in whole way will be expecting. I will be absolutely confident that that would be happening. And the games which continue will be one thing that in whole will be absolutely the fun and in whole be absolutely fun and definitely my person very comparison right now. So like right now, I'm currently definitely got like the games to continue on to like the fourth game, and it will be definitely the thing that I'm able to remember that the fourth game will be definitely having some connection to like the title of that it's nice as well as the definitely was the remember. Also definitely my person very impression right now with like in his decision to like replay like the 27 lost like Syrian soldiers with like Squid game or like I'm definitely praying this would probably be eventually spiraling into and leading into like an eventual scenario where like I'm definitely right now predicting that like this situation would be resulting in that proving to be extremely ending up eventually favoring and giving that advantage to that city of that Janko and things like that is definitely on the train because that while they will be infiltrating into the Squid building at that point. It's like the scenario that I'm bringing, like the 2024 Squid itself, like I'm doing that. It will be definitely, I'm still, right now I'm going to bring definitely, yeah, right now I'm going to definitely, it would be after like the fourth Squid would be over that time, like by then would be when I'm going to bring that, right as like the Squid would be about to begin, I'm going to bring maybe, or like as like the Squid would be just going on, just around like the time I'm going to bring maybe, like, the time when I'm looking at like Jung Ho's being finally making into like studio and it's like the scenario that I'm doing, portraying into like studio building it's like the scenario that I'm doing. And at that point I was looking like the fact that 27 of like the Squid Game soldiers have gotten eliminated during like Sangham's rebellion and getting replaced with like Squid Game workers full definitely Squid Game workers won't be having like nowhere near like the level of like experience of like or the skills of like using weapons when compared to that of like distributing game. So definitely I'm just making it like possible for like Jung Ho and his like team to be able to in their infiltration attack to be able to like make serious progress in their infiltration attack once they will be infiltrated into like the full game building. Definitely member of game. And on top of that, like basically in-house straight away, even ignoring like the front man in so right now even straight away seem to ignore like the fact ignore like the elimination of like the loss of like 8 to game managers as well. That Liam Manurin, this all collectively would be like totally eventually uh, creating that situation, advantages kind of like a situation during like downfall and his teams like giving the inspiration into like system game building. This is definitely my ambition. And that coupled with like the unexpected eventual entry and infiltration into like game building by like the team B of Janho as well, which I'm definitely still thinking about the revolution will be definitely happening like definitely my preference. That will be totally changing like the tide of like the entire situation in like the favor of like Sanjo. It's like the and it was partly against his host like the definitive the number of the brain and members of the so like I'm doing it will be like the skills getting like stopped and interrupted during like either during like the first game or like after like the fourth game will be over. During this time like I'm doing definitely it will be around this time that I was running the games will be put to finance respectively mandatory. And also I'm still seeing the mandatory mention that wouldn't just be like a lot of like backfirings that will be definitely going to be happening for like important like plan in like the 2024 games itself and that wouldn't just be like Janho and his team's like infiltration into like the CDM building but like the unexpected infiltration of like and the backup happening through like the team of like Janho as well as like that coupled with like San Jones of Rebellion at that point or around that time with like San Jones like a Rebellion. It was definitely during that integration of Jumbo definitely I was during San Jones to be hearing like the sounds of like that from the from a different area within like the building. So like at that point San Jones instantly remembering about like Jumbo. The possibility of like it being like Jumbo and it's with infiltration. So like I'm thinking that will begin Sangon that like source of energy and motivation and morale, which will be resulting in like Sangon, along with like the trio of teams that I'm switching on to would be right now, but definitely would be like Sangon and Philip. Dayhook as well as Chojin. That would be once again starting their rebellion, but like it will be just the theme of century, you know. So like collectively and as that as well as like Neol as well, other by that would be definitely be part of like either Jumbo's team or like be part of like most likely I'm will be part of like Jumbo's team during that integration as well. So that is also like about that I'm doing. So like collectively with all the collective effort like like with all the collective effort like I'm keeping like definitely this weekend getting stuff through post in such a manner like the with the scenario that I'm definitely running and looking. Okay, so like definitely on the Remsa right now with like Sandron attacking like the shaman woman like I'm trying to totally resulting in like basically especially since like the shaman woman right now have like two followers with like I'm like a shaman woman like definitely like the next game like the fourth game definitely using two of the followers to basically target specifically content in like the fourth game like the scenario that I'm doing. So definitely using them as well as like some as well maybe like attempting to like the three of them like trying to like gang up and trying to like bring down specifically targeting Sangyo and bring down Sangyo in like the fourth period as like the that way like the Shaman maybe attempting to like take revenge on that Sangyo like those are like a sort of big plan and okay, so like the new three merchant right now that's for like new right now threatening like the only remaining of the game was to save and that the father's looking candidate that the current still for like the scenario is that once that single top game worker would be saving that father's looking candidate like rating and saving like the father's looking candidate like at that point of like would be taking the light and eliminating that those game of like the scenario that I'm going. So like I was like such a scenario happening and I'm referring about which like I'm referring uh definitely I'm referring that father speaking candidate at that point would be seriously shocked at like me although that will he would totally against me on purpose that it definitely my particular so definitely that kind of a good scenario where I was definitely being like an argument from startup getting started from like the side of like that part of the candidate towards like for like eliminating like for that eliminating that like the to get worker at that point. It's like the and especially even after like him like saving like the part of the candidate. It's like the scenario that I was going to for example okay, so like the name of the PPM production right now as for landing. So right now looking at like that studio candidate for an kind of like taken the life of like that studio candidate that means so like a lot. Like I'm referring that really this totally would be due to like I'm referring means to take down what I would totally fix in his like mind. That I'm referring that really after like seeing the shock of like that friends with the candidate of like Thanos like eliminating that that girl and they pull into like a lot like maybe seeing her like suffer to to getting eliminated to the point of getting eliminated like if they are doing that trauma within like Nimzo might have seriously created that like absolute scar within like Nimzo to the point of like I'm doing Nimzo right now to be totally feeling absolutely cold person definitely not remembering and that's the only thing in that Nimzo's mind would be to like draw to definitely eliminate that to ensure to like eliminate that like front studio candidate of that plan of this definitely and so like definitely regardless of like the nature of like the fourth studio member for like I'm preferring maybe for like the fourth studio definitely I'm preferring most likely would be like a team once again a team based studio definitely not for everything just like I'm thinking like then so totally approaching that front studio candidate of like Thanos and definitely I mean so totally want to put on that absolute fake act take down with that absolute rage and like absolute desire to get revenge on that front studio candidate of Thanos and to like eliminate it like the first game of the like and mean so totally putting on such an absolute fake act and basically like like mean so asking if like basically if that friends with the candidates they take mean so to be part of its team it's like the scenario that I'm looking so like I'm looking like the fake that like friends with the candidate of like of like I'm totally falling for the trap and like take actions of like Minsu and basically him deciding to like have Minsu as part of his team in like the fourth skill game and like Liam during the fourth skill game. Definitely the scenario that I'm looking for like Minsu as like the fourth skill game would be provoking like Minsu making that absolute ultimate betrayal uh, on like the front game and the rate of the Thanos and then look for that the Minsu looking like either through a betrayal kind of like a scenario which like Minsu will be consciously doing like resulting in like that front skill candidate elimination feed like the fourth period or like I'm looking like as like the front skill candidate would be positions of like the fourth game of the different like Minsu like I'm just looking like the possibility definitely and extremely dangerous for this. So like I'm looking at by playing that game like it was mean so attacking like the program especially attacking like that to game candidate and pushing him or something and maybe like the possible game being like such an example in the possible game being plus that basically like the cut of what's to games from like the game and everything like usually maybe like not the exact but still it being a game like there will be an extreme depth it would be like the game's being played at like an extremely high kind of like a point, and so like there will be like extreme depth on both sides. Along the scenario is what I'm looking for. So like mean, so while like the principal game candidate will be least executing it and going to have start down like mean, so only like pushing him or something and basically that way that principal game candidate ending up getting eliminated. That's like the other possibility that I'm delivering. Or like I'm delivering like the other possibility as for like how Minsu would be like eliminating like that from Suzuki candidate would be through like Minsu like definitely like would be feeling absolutely cold within and basically within him and basically with that absolute desire to like experiment and eliminate that from Suzuki candidate like Minsu totally maybe like sacrificing himself by taking like the front Suzuki candidate along with him and basically that way that double elimination happening through such a manner is like getting into scenario of like the other possible scenario that I'm considering for which like how Minso would be like eliminating the presidential candidate in specifically the Libertarian exports game itself is like potential scenario that I'm using for the connecting and my person very interesting. Okay, so like the field of the reaction right now as your lesson on right now intensely staring at like data and realize that they get betrayal like the leave of the reaction right now that they need to be only use like example right now to be absolutely stealing that they will so like they hope this entire time was like definitely lying about him being like an ex-marine was might have been like the sole fact of that night out resulting like San John's team members that will be seeing Tejo as like an ex-marine and that way then depending on Tejo to like get the ammo and basically that way that solely due to that line of Tejo like San John's like mission to that basically to free and save everyone and put an end to like the students as well as like San John's even losing to like good front jump there that all being due to that sort like of like they hope about like him doing an extraordinary movie along the line sounds on movie to feeling that name of the empathy. So like I'm this like feeling turning Sanjyon into like a monster and Sanjyon probably temporarily probably seriously losing all of it like empathy and not being able to like think along the lines as to like the working day of like why exactly they hope might have even made up such a like and basically see after like even realizing about like the extreme fears of like they hope like basically the fact that like that some Indian candidate had told Sangron about like they were totally frozen freezing at that point. Like basically like the possibility of like that being due to that extreme fear of like they were and basically that's what like the reason behind that fear and basically that basically as to like why exactly they hope might have told that lie to like Sangron and all of the right while exactly while Plato had joined Sangron's team that basically Sangron won't be able to like I'm the morning right now Sangron won't not being able to that explain talk of that especially Jungle that like I'm saying like Sangron that not being able to like connect the dots and then trying that instead like I'm using Sangron temporarily losing all of like empathy and basically being filled with that absolute realistic kind of like the revenge towards that of like a feeling towards like their hope and basically like I'm different like Sangron only that which temporarily turning into like an absolute monster who will be totally like looking for a chance to like eliminate Devo right now and get revenge on Devo, like the scenario that I'm looking for. Like, this will be all like what I'm looking for, like eventually like the current pair of like Sangon towards like Devo would be actually leading towards like the scenario that I'm looking. So like I'm looking scenario to be like I'm looking it came night time and I was for like during that during night like I'm doing maybe Devo might wanting to like use the restroom. So like I'm doing Devo during night time like basically walking past like the Sanjot with his skill in is like a lot of kind of negative whenever they hope so that absolute fear without looking towards like Sanjot like walking past Sanjot like just scenarios that I'm living. So like at that point Sanjot totally like putting on a fake eye and basically calling for Keiko like was an intelligent manner like was not that amazing. So like at that point like Keiko next finger like the manner would be like turning the lenses into like Sanjot. So like Sanjot would be calling with that gentle voice will be calling Devo towards him, while one of like Saigon will still be in that developed kind of situation. And at that point, like while Devo would be like slowly and fearfully that will be walking towards like Sanjon and getting close to like Sanjon. Like at that point, I was thinking exactly like how Sanjon had attacked like the term movement, like I'm getting Sanjon for attacking Devo. And basically, Devo was struggling at that point, and Sanjon will be attacking Devo with that absolute because the Sanjon won't be like think straight at all and would have turned into like a monster kind of like a mindset where like realistic mindset where like Santon would be like attacking Teiho exactly like how Santon had attacked Yasukama Numa. And Sanyon at that point would be attacking Teiho to set up this intent to like eliminate Teiho and state out his frustration that way would be around the big manner like I'm looking like Sanyon is acting at that point is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like at that point I'm looking like the mother speaking and a bunch of swimming and it's waking up from like the struggle of that they hope to like free himself from like Sanjos, which like they hold be doing like their best to like free himself from Sanjos clutches. But like I'm doing Sanjos like Sanjos won't be like letting go of that label and then we're like that struggle of they hope that basically waking up that the other swimming candidate and that when like the mother swimming candidate seeing this and chosen and like the son swimming candidate like they will all see as well seeing this as they will all become rushing it to like save they hope it's like the scenarios that I'm looking and I'm also feeling like all of them trying to like forcefully let go of like Sanjay grip or like they hope it's like the scenario that is and like they hope it only choking at that point like the scenario that and like regardless of like even children as well trying to like read Sanjay like hit like I'm going to still not working out that will be how much extremely Sanjay will be like totally having this like physical need to like such a kind of like a mindset and will be zoned out and cold with the limit so that way, I was looking at that point. I was trying to find the like the data on the like about to totally that get eliminated like by the grip of like London like the scenario that I was so like at that very last second I was trying like that not that's what and like rushing running towards like Sanjo and basically snapping Sanjo at that point is like the scenario that and at that point I was thinking if that would be how they can Sanjo would finally snapping out of it especially when right time, like some of the Syrian candidate will be shouting out like meaningful words to us like Sanjo. That they in the life of like really has Sanjo turned into this like monster just because of like Sanjo not being able to like save his like because of Sanjo having lost his friend and not being able to like save them like that very same Sanjo to try to like save them was like trying to like take the life of one of them that would be along the lines of considering have Sanjon turned into such a monster only along the lines of like the that mother to being candidate like at that point shouting and asking Sanjon at that point is like the scenario that I'm doing and at that point I'm really trying it would be only at that point that I'm saying Sanjon would be like finally snapping out of it and will be returning back to the like center. It's like the scenario that I'm doing and like the at that moment Sanjon finally letting go and they will be like struggling to like take this product at that point is like the scenario that I'm doing and once like they will be finally catch this product like I'm doing like and even they was voice as like like will be simply uh feeling painful and like getting upset at that point is like the like on the like of like the scenario that I'm doing. Yet like I was and that way they go after like a few minutes like I'm doing they go still like probably while they go be like people struggling to like speak and will be probably they are like okay and still I'm looking like they go only will be also feeling that guilt and regret and basically quickly with like Jungle as well, to whom like definitely I'm still remember everything that like Diego might have had such an absolute flaws, might have felt such an absolute flaw, close and personal bond towards like especially because of like definitely I'm still remember the ambition that like Diego might have definitely like to like Diego someone who's like so afraid and afraid and was like shivering with fear during like the event and like they were actually won't be an ex-marine. Might have only bluff about like they were being an ex-marine. But like in actuality it might have been Dago's father. Like that part about like Dago's father, I think like Dago hasn't revealed to like Sanjon and all of them that like his father as well being an ex-marine. That part I'm considering like would be I think Dago said that what I think I'm not sure. So like definitely my Victorian Bridge is definitely for like Dago's father in activity might definitely be an ex-marine and Dago might be so proud of like his father and might have that might have that good respect for his like father and father might be no more with living with so definitely my birthday impression for like they going like the past might have that is absolute best as well to be a marine and they who might have failed like the exams or like the best friend might have better than getting better and might have been what might have happened. So definitely like but in case of like with the electricity games like I'm sure like they who might have been uh but and like they who experience fear as well might have been a factor that might have even gotten they who rejected from like the from which like attempt at seeking a job from the Marines. It's also like about to that and what might have happened in like taking especially in the again. So like uh definitely at like and even they hope flop like it should definitely like flop that she was like an extraordinary like is in at total like Janbe and Sanjay and all of them in like the beginning might have been like out of it like a good fear like from me attempting to like basically to get into a team so that like they could like survive especially when friend because like they might be having that absolute fear within him and especially after the fact that I think like after like the first game was like over like and definitely after like witnessing the shock of like going through the shock of like the first like green light to game itself like I'm going there might have been so screen this year so like I'm like might have been that absolutely the pretty high those absolute best like hide that absolute fear within Deco because like Deco might be totally feeling that like others would find that fear as like uh that absolute weakness and so like that might result in like Deco not getting fixed into like any of like settings and that way like Deco by himself would be standing absolutely no chance of like being able to able to like survive like the next two game maybe that absolute fear that Deco might have had and so like Deco might have fluffed about like being an ex-marine just so that like Sangyeon and might have fixed all of like courage so far, just so that like Sangyeon and like the others would like that way not only like select him to like control team but also not reject him from the control team would be along the lines and something they totally in extremely clear for they hope would be like a revealing to like Sangyeon at that point with like what with like main one that when struggling with his voice he would be like Sangyeon at that point that's the scenario that I'm looking for. So like they were saying this in a tearful manner and really Deho at that point he was also telling us how much that Jangbei meant to like Deho and that like Deho had probably seen like Jangbei like with like Deho as like the like father figure and like along the lines and about like Deho having that absolute respect towards like Marines and everything would be along the lines that Deho cheerfully telling to like Sandron at that point, it's like the scenario that I was prepared. So like at that point, I was preparing like that they would be totally calming down Sandron and like Sandron would be feeling bad, extremely bad and guilty and regretful about like attacking their hero and taking also get some shape on their hero and all that. And then the Sandron would be holding their hero and like telling sorry to that absolute apology and sorry to like they was just like while both of them would be crying at that point, it's like the scenario that I was and definitely I was looking at that point once again the team came back with like I was looking at that point like Sandron while having one of the like hands like dog up to the bed like I'm thinking would be hugging Lego and like uh at that point itself like that some the game ended it as well as like the mother pulling ended it as well as like Chojo like I'm giving them all like hugging each other tightly and like once again like their whole team spirit like once again returning back and Sangyeon as well with that incident like this is how I'm looking at Sangyeon will be calming down and returning back to the center. It's also like within the scenario that and those are the things and the three Okay, so like the name and reimbursement right now has got like structure right now going up to have like a chat with like example would be definitely for like Mr. Choi would be able to let Mr. Choi definitely feeling that very same kind of like a similar kind of like a suspicion deep down within him that Mr. Choi would be feeling like something seriously off with like something off with like subordinate. Exactly like how that before Jande like elimination like Jande had this like extreme suspicion connecting to that like the feeling of like something off with like connecting to that info that when it was like a sinking candidate like but for it to be like a similar kind of like suspicion right now Mr. Choi would be having toward like the boatman definitely not the ambition definitely since like ever since like Mr. Choi had seen like the boatman that might uh, that might like when like when the drone operator had really was like taken off by like the boatman like different Japanese since then and that coupled with like and since then like I'm doing like and since like on the very next day like when Joy had found out about like the drone operator that missing like since then like I was within myself started to like the role but then to Joy the minimum trend and Joy might have starting to like thing about like everything the boatman had said to like all of them so far, like how he had acted all of them to all of them, going to like all of them so far. Ever since from like the point from even after like the whole trap island explosion situation as well. From that point on, like how like the everything the government had so far acted towards like all of them and everything and this is something might have only said thought about like the government for like joint especially when right now like I'm looking like overall like story is probably things and of like the government and to discuss this like whole disturbing feeling connected to like the government but like example might be the sole reason for like joy uh, right now showing up for like the chat with like Django right now. Definitely monitoring. So like this interaction currently that will be taking place between like Mr. Joy and like Django on the and would be definitely resulting in like Django finally being able to like solve the puzzle as for like why that for like the for 2 whole years I think like that's like Django had tried to like find the PC game and Django wasn't able to like find it that being solely due to like the presence of this very same force as that Janko that that's was a realization of the different like of like realization of such an extreme position like for the first time in like Janko's life like Janko would be like starting to like seriously suspect like the possibility of like the both man being betrayed after this like current interaction like joy like scenario that I'm doing and then I'm looking like that's when I'm looking like without like creating that at all like I'm looking like Janko would be like finding out the truth out of like the boat right just like scenario that I'm doing and after that like I'm using definitely and yet like I'm doing definitely for like the boat right would not get eliminated and I'm looking like after that like I'm looking like like I'm looking like Janko for like the boat right to like take Janko and take to like the exact to get island and that way like I'm looking definitely that right now the most likely that we must scenario and like that way Janko and team being able to like make it towards like Citizen Island and sorry, being able to like integrate into like the Citizen building by the time like the fourth game would be over or like I'm even right before like the right as like the Squid Game would be delivered. Is like my considering ambition right now. Okay, so that the minimum ambition right now for that Janko right now currently defending the boardman captain for against like the frustration for like so it would be definitely on for her minimum direction because like the with like this current interaction definitely I'm preferring the moment like the moment like Joy mentioned like the screwdriver itself like as a point that it might have suddenly sparked within Jan Ho like the police officer in Jan Ho definitely I'm preferring job like the definite possibility of that the boatman is from having like being a traitor, especially now but like I'm doing what Jan Ho would be doing right now would be totally putting on that as would take it in a conscious manner to totally calm down the step joy because like Janko would be like totally fearing like the possibility that like if Janko agrees to Mr. Joy right now, then like the possibility of like Mr. Joy possibly getting enraged. That's okay because of like Mr. Joy as well has lost his left friend due to like the people come to like the games and everything. So like if like Mr. Choi realizes that like the boatman, Mr. Funk as something as also like a connection to like the games and like the people running like, the games like then like the possibility of like Mr. Choi acting in like an aggressive manner and straight away that without any precaution like straight away like marching towards like trying to like attack like the boatman Mr. Park like attacking like the boatman Captain Park and that way that attempt of like Mr. Joy ending up in like Mr. Joy getting into that shield state or like getting taken up on stage. So the along the lines of like the fear that John Ho will be right now having and which might be the reason for like John Ho right now only thoroughly defending Mr. Park like the boatman against the presentation of like Mr. Joy. It's definitely memorable already like I'm looking at it might not only pass within that John Ho right now and everything might have totally right now itself. At the moment, and I was I mentioned like the school driver in like the stuff like the boatman's hand itself, like I'm keeping that it might have suddenly like past and flick for like Jumbo. And everything might have totally made sense from Jumbo. Connecting to that fact that like it was with the same boatman that had found that Janko after like Janko had fallen from like the like 20 in 2020 and like the fact that for like the past uh, 2 years like Janko had researched for like to find the Game Island and wasn't able to solely been due to like was very saying past like persons of like Janko. All this like on bring instantly might have like for like Janko. Definitely my friend and Janko might have even right now the thing of like how like about like the trap island explosion as well. Like basically in which like as well like the trap didn't end up like that island at all like basically and all that like basically definitely I'm looking for like all this like and even the fact that there was like a trap island spell for like Junho and all of them. And basically also the fact that like they are Junho and team like strategy using like the Sangyeon's like street striking location as well. That strategy as well getting destroyed. Like basically all of that will be only right now simultaneously only connecting for Junho because of like definitely Junho might have only even stored the Godman Mixer Park even before setting out like payment Junho might have only told Mixer Park about like the there are three tracking location strategy of like Sanjon and everything. It's all about everything everything. So like everything the puzzle might have been instantly solved for like Junho already right now with like the very moment like Joy mentioned like Mr. seeing Mr. Spark like the boatman holding blue driver in like the night itself. Definitely my own reference. Yet like I'm looking like definitely Junho on the right now totally putting on that absolute stake and defending that the boatman so that like his choice would be totally thinking that basically he was wrong and like the boatman is like innocent so that like Junho would be like able to like properly prepare to that basically and properly with that absolute preparation would be able to that approach like the boatman and that basically bring him down and basically capture him and interrogate him before like he would be getting any chance to that escape by saying that by before even getting any chance to like escape through any means or like even through like taking a joy on stage or anything to ensure like the safety of Mr. Joy as well as like to ensure that like the boatman doesn't manage to like escape from them. Only what like I'm just like jump over right now attempting to like the reckoning of like the boatman right now against like Joy. The minimum solution right now. Okay, so like the minimum solution right now that's for like Sanjay right now seeing like the corpse of like Jan they right before entering like the boat. That's the thing right now for like definitely for I'm sitting them at the so that like the fourth game would definitely be a team based game is definitely not great and where like I'm definitely thinking it would be like a team of three that needs to be created just like my creator somewhere and then the like the team won't be able to like be created on like the own will of like the city where it is like I'm thinking that it would be like kind of like a lot kind of like a situation where like by the features of randomly the teams will be getting selected uh, without like the shooting and themselves not being able to like choose that who odds will be in that team. So like I'm really seeing like a lot or something and basically they have to pick like numbers or something and they believe that's where randomly the team getting selected. So like teams of three is what I'm looking for and in that Conjure's team like I'm just like it would be like Sanjon that they end up uh getting into like the team of like ending up being part of like the team of like in Sanjon three-member team members should be like Sanjon, Deho, as well as like some other Korean candidates like Rosvanari that are right. So they will be like extremely would be like extremely scared of that basically of like Sanjon's like body language and the way Sanjon is like looking at like the scenario that so like Sanjon and the brain would be they count would be like totally would have totally lost like sense of and after being like young right before like starting like the fourth game definitely I would bring Sanjon playing like the fourth again with that absolute intent to like eliminate Deho in that kind of extremely realistic manner. Definitely correct because like from Sanjon's like way of thinking like uh, in a realistic manner and like for example you're right now thinking that it will be regardless of like Sanjon starting any more rebellion like as long as like Deho will present in like the like if the game ended in like that rebellion would be like totally getting destroyed by Deho again, would be around the lines of like in the extreme manner, like Sanjong would be feeling, and so like Sanjong would be absolutely in a realistic way, like San like mindset changing, and Sanjong would be always seeing that basically for that to say all the Sugan candidates eventually, like Sanjong would be having to like ensure to like eliminate their role, to be around the lines, like being like a realistic member, Sanjong would be thinking. So like I'm looking in that three member team based game from each William and candidate would be like having to like form a team of three. It's like the scenario that I'm looking like the first William. Where like I'm saying, the nature of like the first William would be in such a way that basically that like the team members would like basically like eliminate one of their own teammates or like the team members to like get like maybe an advantage or like an upper hand in like the possibility, like the possibility that that they like kind of like in a way as if like what like the nature of the what we game might be. Definitely not the frame so like I'm looking for like that way that might be what like nice and peace would be. So like I'm looking like that weapon would be like provide for like this to be candidate so also like that and so that way like in that possible game I'm looking like Sanjon taking out as good frustration and rage towards like Debo by trying to like eliminate Debo and Debo be extremely scared and trying to like escape from like Sanjon as like Sanjon be chasing after like Debo and trying to like eliminate Debo's like the scenario that I'm doing and that for that Super New resulting in like definitely Sanjon catching up to like Debo and capturing Debo and maybe Super like scenario being like as like Sanjon will be about to eliminate and take the life that Debo and that very last second like like maybe like the third member election against team that some other Indian candidate like Zach Wilson has like to protect their like the scenario that I'm looking for it. And like that might be what like the fact of that might snap out that would be allowing Sangon to be able to like snap out of it and basically realize like that the monster that Sangon has turned into. And basically from that point on like that's been even more of like a regret happening within like Sangon at that point is like the scenario that is happening and Sangon like coming back to his center. This is like one possible scenario that I'm thinking. Another possible scenario for like Sangon attempting to like in like the Australian Sanjor chasing after like they were trying to like eliminate they were like the scenario that I was running. They were always struggling to like survive from like Sanjor running after him to like eliminate him. So like I'm during this time like I'm like the third member like uh the mother to gain two members to bring would be like the mother to bring candidate would be like struggling hard to like catch up to like Sanjor like to scenario that I'm thinking. And eventually I'm looking Sanjor to take corner they hope and as like I'm going to be about to eliminate Debo. Like at that very last second, I'm going to protect another something candidate, like laughing Sanjo, and basically telling Sanjo like along the lines as of like to look at like the amount of that like Sanjo has to become. And along this line, like as for like Sanjo having done all this to like save all of them and like look at how this very same Sanjo is right now trying to like eliminate one of them that will be along the lines of the like that not a good game candidate defending Sanjay lag and like on the line that lead them was giving candidate at that point also shouting at like Sanjay and telling Sanjay that like that she had seen how extremely afraid they both was and basically how extremely he was like frozen and basically in fear like he was like also shaking with like and shivering with like fear as well like basically she had seen that absolutely everything like they would not everyone is like the same and like basically some of them would be like singly afraid like they who would like think that like I'm looking that mother figure candidate at that point telling someone that she knows that they who genuinely wanted to like give it everything and help with Sangyon out like and he had in fact given just maximum but like even at like the maximum still eventually he was like consumed by that fear which that about which like Devo at that point had absolutely no control over. He had done his like maximum at that point. Maybe along the lines on the like that not a brilliant candidate like probably selling Sanjon and at that point I was throwing Sanjon we shockingly realized that they believe the extreme wrong that he had done. And basically at that point, I was thinking like when Chandra will be finally coming back to his like sense of understanding, there will be a con in the it ending up being a consequence for like all that wastage of time that will be happening at that point. Because like at that point I was putting finally Sanjon as well as like Chandra will be realizing his like mistakes and Sanjon at that point starting to like play the games in like the proper and ethical manner and trying to like survive and win that game with like the three of them surviving that game. But like I'm doing by then like I'm doing a lot of lecture ending up being consequence for like Sanjon wasting away so much time. And basically that way that once like Sanjon will be that come back to his like 10% basically deciding to like complete the game in like the right in like the ethical manner, like I'm living by the like time will be extremely short, like I'm living so like that whole situation resulting in like basically some the mother of the candidate maybe ending up like eliminating herself so that like Hanjo and they would like survive and win that game. It's like the scenario that I'm looking for. Or like I'm looking like within that short time as like Hanjo and they hope and like the Malaxodian and they would be rushing to like trying to like, complete like, the games in like critical manner like still like time being extremely short and like the amount of Sudian candidates not ever sustained all days and across them not being able to like make it in time to like the finish line and basically maybe through much a manner like Sangyon and Teho would be like completing like the game like some other candidate like like ending up getting eliminated and that being like the next shot the same shot for like Sangyon like the scenario that I'm covering. Yeah, like I'm doing like Sangyon like I'm looking at I'm looking definitely that all of them like totally still like totally even though initially and that representing back to something candidate initially being extremely having that extreme preparation towards like Sanjon, but like it is still like it's totally calming down and basically that the group once again that getting like the bond between the two group once again getting us stalled like the scenario that the bond of that for something being candidate and like Sanjon well as like Remo as well as children like one of their bond like once again usually finally getting stored back. And but the very like the Samsung game candidate would be that telling at that point telling Sandra and all of them that like this would be exactly that he knows it like mom and this would be exactly if she were alive like this would be exactly what she would want out of me for me to like forgive Sandra and basically to fight together as a team with like Sandra. And also this line something like the Samsung game candidate telling Sandra and everything like Sandra thought they maybe like holding like the some Putin candidate like maybe meeting before like the some Putin candidate and like literally telling stories to like some PK candidate. So like a really possible scenario that I'm looking for the things and my degree. And so like definitely I'm still thinking about the career person that like plays really in like the positive game for like the actually like to be like a 3 member team based game. And like I'm also prepping for like there to be two options, two ways in which that game could be played like in like the ethical manner or like the non-ethical manner. And the non-ethical manner would be like the way in which like you eliminate like one of like the team members or like the other two team members to like advance and like the ethical manner would be an extremely hard manner for which like they have to like play the game to complete like to be able to like complete the game like the scenarios that I'm doing. So like that way, I'm considering definitely that in the case of like Minso's team like I'm expecting so ending up being in like the same thing as that of that friend of Thanos. Like that's the candidate who was like the friend of Thanos who had like eliminated like that the chicken candidate who makes so like so much like I'm just like So that way, like Minto and that other that friends to be a candidate of that kind of as well as and up to be a candidate of like what I'm like what to be like their thing. So like I'm in that way, and I'm going to stand like Minto will be totally different because like after like witnessing the suffering elimination of like that girls to be a candidate to Minto like so much by like the hands of like that front to be a candidate of like kind of something like Minsu would have totally changed that Sharps would have totally and Trauma would have totally changed Minsu to the point that Minsu totally being acting in an indifferent manner, where like Minsu would be like totally extremely then more serious and won't be like not that much acting in like an extremely afraid body language manner as he used to be until that point of like the scenario that so that under the like resulting in like maybe that front of like Thanos, like that's the candidate taking quite a liking towards like Minso and finding and to be like an interesting to be candidate at that point, and then like like him totally telling his like plans like Minso to like eliminate to play the game secretly to telling them to the context their games to to like eliminate the first member in their team, and that way like like once like the games begins like like that Brazilian candidate chasing after like the third member in their team and trying to like eliminate that third member. And that means as well would be like totally putting on his plate and basically running along with like that Brazilian candidate. And putting on plate like that is like he's totally part of that. He's totally part of that and in agreement with like that Thanos Brazilian candidate plan. Stephanie Meltzer, like on the actually that Thanos Brazilian candidate catching up with that third member by chasing him down and catch cornering him and like as like Thanos' friends will ended will be about to eliminate him. At that point I'm looking like the unexpected twist happening for like Thanos' friend with like Minzu eliminating like Thanos was at that point. It was like the scenario from the kind of like scenario that I'm